What is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here at Dean7904 if you want to get all technical on me as far as the handle in the DFS industry. It's 10:10 on the East Coast, 7:10 on the West Coast, 9:10 Tennessee time, which of course it's time for the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It's called Grinderslive. Joining me today, it's an intimate show, just a two-man booth. It's John Daigle. You'll know him from Roto World. John, we're talking DFS today. It's a really, really fun slate. We're going to dig in for the next 50 minutes, then we're going to hand it off to Tambo and Stevie, and then Tuttle and Christy and Roth. Take you guys all up to lock. So get comfortable here. We're here for the next 3 hours. Not the two of us, John. Don't worry about it. We're just going to knock in a good 48, 49, 50 minutes or so. How are you doing today? Good morning. And, are we excited? We getting excited about this week 14. Week 14 DFS slate. We're officially at the quarter pole.
We are just the warm-up act. We're the group that comes on that people applaud, but they're not sure they should be applauding. They just know they walk out on the stage first to warm them up. Overall, though, a good slate, one I like a lot. The issue that I've had all week long is that I've struggled in dwindling down my player pool because there are so many good plays and game stacks and team totals today. And I feel like we've eliminated some. We'll talk about them in depth, of course, more. We had the Brandon Cooks news this morning. It seems like even if Jameson Crowder's active, he's going to be an emergency option only. So that makes it a little easier for us if we want to go Braxton Berrios or Brashad Perryman. We had the late DeAndre Washington Saturday news that shook up the DFS world. So a lot still to get to, but I feel like it's become slightly easier with the Saturday news.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not feel comfortable with the team total for the Jets at 16 and change and chalky Brashard Perryman and maybe, if you don't have the money for Perryman, like a Jeff Smith or a Braxton Berrios starts. Washington, of course, for Miami seems like the last man standing. Well, Patrick Laird is certainly lurking to get behind. Maybe he's a third down back guy. But, it's going to be a fun one for sure. 13-game slate, so flattens out ownership to some extent. This is going to be the biggest slate we have all year with the games next week. A couple of games playing on Saturday as well. I guess the same amount of games as they played, week 3 before the buys kicked in. No buys today, obviously. And the Packers are going to be super, super chalky because they're playing the Lions, got a team total around 30 or so. And Aaron Rodgers is a greedy Gus, and he just wants every single touchdown in the world, no matter where the ball happens to be placed. And they all happen to go to Adams, too. So that's going to be chalky for sure. But all right, let's dive in. We're going to break it down. Before we do that, let's say hello to YouTube. What up, YouTube? Feel free to like, subscribe. Do appreciate that. Hit on the notification bell. You can smash it, whatever adjective you is to your preference. Do want to mention that Devin, our fabulous multitasking producer, went ahead and dropped the link in chat for y'all. If you want to get $5 off your Core 4 premium at Rotogrinders, that's football, baseball, basketball, and golf. Hit that link up, $5 off your first month. And you get basketball right around the corner. Preseason was good to me last night. Preseason basketball was a lot of fun. Do you dabble in the basketball? Is that something you care for?
Regular season. Preseason still overlaps with football season typically. So I don't have time for that. But regular season, I'm all in.
Oh man, if you're not watching like Pistons, so Magic like preseason game 1. What are you doing with your life? It's just terrible. But it was fun.
Wasn't there some like foul trouble last night that shook up the slate?
Oh no, that's the thing is the coaches don't pull their player. There's no foul trouble.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, who cares? Like if they foul out, whatever. Like the whole idea is just hopefully my starter just sticks around long enough in the third quarter or something like that. All right, let's talk football. It's daily fantasy sports. All we care about is today and today only. Today there is preseason basketball later on today, but we're talking about the NFL main slate. We're talking about quarterbacks. We're opening it up, and I kind of mentioned Aaron Rodgers' biggest total in a dome against the Detroit team. It's absolutely putrid. Mahomes obviously in the slate as well too. Mahomes a little bit more expensive on DK, a little bit less expensive on FanDuel. Is from a raw points perspective, is that where we're starting? Is it Mahomes and Rodgers?
It's both. I swear to you, I've never had this many quarterbacks in my player pool ever. And I'm still dwindling it down, like I mentioned earlier. Mahomes, of course, the Chiefs are one of 3 teams with a team total over 30 this morning. It's been bet up. Meanwhile, the Dolphins total has also risen by 1.5 points. So it seems like one that Vegas is at least thinking is going to go over. The slate, as we have heard on this show and other shows before, flipped on its head yesterday with DeAndre Washington news. The issue with DeAndre Washington for tournaments, in my opinion, on cash, DK, Stoneman, no big deal, whatever, just take it. But in tournaments, it's not exactly a free square because we know where the ownership is going to come in at the top of that game. It's going to be DeAndre Washington that allows you to get to Kelsey, who's the week winner every single week at his position. And if both guys are catching 15 plus, 20 plus, which I expect in tournaments, then that really leaves you limited for any kind of uniqueness. So I don't really like the DeAndre Washington, Travis Kelsey builds. Having said that, like Aaron Rodgers, like the Vikings-Bucks game, like the Titans-Jaguars game, the ancillary pieces remain my favorite on this entire slate. I feel like you have to make at least one you have to roster one receiver who you're uncomfortable with here because double stacking the ancillary options in these high totals seems to be the key on this slate. If everyone goes to Brashad Perryman, for instance, like we can go to Marquez Valdez-Scantling in our Rodgers double stacks, or we can go to, let's say, Sammy Watkins in our Mahomes double stacks. And I think that allows you to have uniqueness in these high totals. Aaron Rodgers, as you mentioned, of course, in a terrific spot. Just a absolute monster total here, the highest implying team total of the entire slate. My issue with that, though, is that who are we bringing back? Because you can, like, Devontae Adams is good chalk. We know Devontae Adams is pretty much going to get there, but everyone's going to look to play him. He's in a unique position in this slate because he's in a late swap position. So we can at least roster him in the flex and judge from what happens from the noon games whether we need to get off of him or not. But if everyone's still going to play pretty much him and Aaron Jones from that game, then I think you need to diversify yourself and at least have one guy bringing back between Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkinson, or I'm still debating DeAndre Swift on the Lions side.
Yeah. By the way, I have never heard anybody put it that way. That's the slate's been flipped on its head. That's the first time I've heard that. That's pretty clever. I like that. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna steal that if you don't mind.
No one says it, so feel free to.
So I think, by the way, for the record, I think Hawkinson's probably the best bring back if you want to bring back, tight end. It's a stronger position today with Kelsey out there and Waller out there, and I think there's some pretty decent punts from at least the way tight end's been throughout the week, throughout the season. Marvin Jones, if you believe in quarterback, wide receiver matchups, whatever, but he's still fine. Cephas, I don't trust him being on the field enough. Swift, who the heck knows? We're talking quarterbacks kind of right now, but since you brought up Swift, I'm curious your thoughts because, Detroit's going nowhere. Like Adrian Peterson said, at least it's like a week ago, it's like Swift just doesn't seem right. We got concussed. They use a different word. They said like a brain bruise or something like that, which is a scary.
When Peterson was being interviewed by the media, he said brain injury, which does not sound healthy.
And that's what a concussion is, but it just sounds much more severe when it's called brain injury as opposed to concussion, right?
Right.
But why would you bring Swift back and have him play 10 snaps or 10 carries? But why run him into the ground? Because he's theoretically your running back in the future. I don't understand what's going on. Why bring him back for a half a turn? I just don't understand that situation. I'd love to get some more clarity, but we're probably not going to get it.
Unfortunately, no. And again, we're on quarterbacks right now, but I'll quickly say, because like I said, I've been debating that all week because Swift, if he plays even 60% of the snaps, he's an absolute smash on this slate. And he's in the middle tier running backs. Everyone's debating Dave Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott, all these other guys. Swift's just sitting there, and he's going to be 1-2% at max rostered. He practiced in full on Friday with an illness. It's not even the concussion. He's cleared the league's protocol. So why would he practice in full if they're just going to give him a limited number of snaps as Darrell Bevell attempts to keep this job? He's trying to get a head coaching job for the Lions at the end of the year. So I don't quite understand the 10 plays or whatever packages they're going to have him in. If he's active, I really think he's going to get his usual role like we saw before his injury with 70+% of the snaps.
And by the way, I think it was on our show Wednesday night. I can't remember if it was you or Rebar who gave us a stat regarding Rodgers and just Green Bay scoring, but was it every Green Bay score, 75% of their scores this year have been touchdowns, and 70% of the scores Detroit has yielded have been touchdowns. So
Reeves is a master of the red zone scoring and whatnot. So that's definitely Reeves.
Yeah, Rodgers just feels like 303 on layaway in a dome, and again, they're on the 1 yard line. He's a greedy Gus. Maybe he's still angry about probably not getting any receiving help. And he's, we're at the 1 yard line. We're throwing the ball to Adams. We want to rack up those touchdowns. which, Jones makes for an interesting tournament pivot, obviously, but it's just super frustrating if you have Jones, and he's also not even on the field 30% of the time. But and Mahomes is just matchup proof. I know Miami defense is, Miami's been a team that's exceeded expectations this year, but that doesn't mean they're going to be able to suppress Mahomes. I think for sure he's interesting. But as far as other quarterbacks that jump out, we were talking pre-show about Russ Wilson and like against the Jets, and the Jets, we know they're not good and they're beat up and they're just kind of playing out the string, and that they haven't been letting him cook of late. And does he have to cook? Maybe all he needs to do is make a bowl of spaghetti. Like there's no need for 4 or 5, entrees or courses against the Jets. So, yeah, and maybe Carson takes over and Hyde gets like a vulture touchdown or 2 or something like that. But is Russ, I think we're seeing 9% as far as the ownership. Herbert, they got shut out last week against Atlanta. That seems like a good bounce back spot on the other side. I like Matt Ryan a little bit too, although I like quarterbacks with legs, but he is super cheap, so it's kind of sort of baked in. Wish he had Julio. The splits are not very good. Working our tiers down as far as Russ, as far as Herbert. Any one of those guys do anything for you?
Russ is really interesting because, again, this team total keeps on getting bet up. And I entered the pre-show behind the curtains and was talking like, yeah, I was interested in Seattle at first, but now they're going to be too highly rostered, not interested anymore. And as you said, no one wants to play them according to our ownership numbers, which is what I did not expect at all. I thought they became too popular just based on the thumbnails I saw around the industry, people writing articles. So if that's the case and they're not catching on, of course, I think Russ and double stacking him, going all in, not just sprinkling in DK Metcalf, is one of the best ways to approach this slate, because we also know who exactly to bring it back with, whether it be Braxton Berrios or Brashad Perryman. The Seahawks have still allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. They have claimed to have get better on defense, but remember, in the last 3 weeks, they played Kyler, who got injured mid-game. They played Colt McCoy last week, and Carson Wentz the week before. So I'm very skeptical that their secondary is actually getting better. Maybe inside the box with Jamal Adams playing out of his mind, but deep. This is a Jets offense that has scored 27 points in 3 of the last 4 games, can easily attack. So I still like the game environment a whole lot. And if we're assuming they're all going to come in under rostered, then fine. I will definitely move off to Russ double stacks this morning. Justin Herbert's the one I want to ask you about, because with Julio out, I'm now fading that game entirely. And I feel like Herbert's the one that could come back to kill me in tournaments here. Austin Eckler's in a precarious situation just because, as we talked about on Wednesday, Kalen Ballage out-touched Austin Eckler 3-2 on the first drive. His 10 touches to Eckler's 12 was not game script induced. He's actually being used with Eckler. Of course, Eckler has 25 targets the past 2 weeks, so it doesn't matter. We know Eckler's floor is still the highest of any running back, arguably, on this entire slate. But if they're using both of them, not to mention Justin Jackson coming back today as well, I'm still worried about Eckler's ceiling even in tournaments. So yeah, I'm off of Herbert, but if you can sell him to me, I'm listening for sure.
Yeah, I think the way I'm going to get my Herbert coverage is just playing Allen. I think that's what I'm going to do. And Eckler, I've jumped back and forth on him a few times this week, but I think you're right. I looked at the score and I said, 45-0, let's just throw it out. But from the gate, they were starting Ballage for whatever reason. He were working his way in there. Jackson's lurking. As far as I know, Josh Kelly is still a person, and maybe they start 4. They have 4 running backs dressed today, which is not appealing.
No.
Doesn't mean Eckler can't get there. And also, I don't expect them to be chasing necessarily. This is one of those, Atlanta versus the Chargers. This game has to end in a tie. Nobody wins in this game. I think that's just the way these teams go. Maybe you get an extra quarter or something like that. But Herbert's fine. I'm not here to say you can't play him. And Ryan on the other end, just 5.7K on DK, 300-yard bonus is pretty positive. Chargers are pretty terrible. But again, no Julio significantly hurts their offense, I think. If you look at the splits, it's pretty dramatic what we have as far as the sample size. Gage will step in. Maybe a guy like Hurst steps up a little bit too. And that running game, I don't want any part of it. And I think Atlanta knows that Gurley is, at this point, we said the world's oldest 27-year-old. Who wants any part of that? It's just the way running backs go these days, unfortunately. Do you have a take on Hurts? Because he's super, super cheap and he's got legs and he's presumably going to be behind. Tough matchup there against New Orleans. But, it's kind of sort of somewhat like Taysom Hill was as far as the asking price a couple weeks ago. Is he interesting in tournaments? Because I think most people are afraid.
I'm afraid too, honestly. So the knock, of course, him coming out of, well, first off, Alabama, he couldn't throw the ball at all. He's an elite athlete, but could not throw the ball whatsoever. He goes to Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley's system. Still struggles with what the scouts call on talent, but was in a terrific system that allowed him to just be explosive, throw downfield, and run the ball a lot. So I'm worried about this spot. The Saints have allowed the fewest points per game, just 8.8 over the last 5 games. They get back both Marcus Davenport and Janoris Jenkins, who they didn't have last week. And that 16 points by the Falcons last week was actually the most the Saints had allowed in any game the last 5 games. So since their defense flipped the script, they've become a nightmare to oppose. And so I would rather see what happens with Jalen Hurts, because Taysom Hill, at least, remember, in his first start, he was 4,500. Like, Jalen Hurts isn't even minimum, only $600 more, I understand, but 5,100 still is pretty significant for a terrible spot in his first start when Doug Peterson is also still using like Alshon Jeffrey as their second receiver. So I'm not really on him. For Matt Ryan, I've heard many sharp people try to sell him this week, and I respect their opinions fully, but it's just, even as price, I'm not really on him either. He's averaged over 2 yards per attempt fewer in the 5 games with Julio either absent or limited this year, and the matchups weren't even that tough. And his completion rate dropped 10% in those games as well, as opposed to when Julio is on the field. Plus, we've seen that no one else gets there. We have a 5-game sample, which is a lot for a football season. No one gets there but Calvin Ridley, and even Calvin Ridley's efficiency drops whenever Julio's not on the field. So there's not even really a good double stack option for Ryan. It's just like Calvin Ridley, and that's why I prefer avoiding the quarterbacks there and just going skinny stacks with Ridley, and to your point, Keenan Allen, or I guess Austin Eckler if you're on that.
Yeah, I know. I made a lot of pre-show with just I don't think I had either quarterback, but I just had those 2 main receivers in that game, hoping that they shine as far as the perspective of that lineup. Dalton is kind of sort of somewhat interesting in a quote unquote revenge game, and he's super cheap if you want to. And his receivers, especially on DK,
Oh yeah,
like Lamb and Gallup, are especially just seem super cheap. I don't mind the pairings there, and even Boyd on the bring back. I know you don't like his quarterback. Well, I presume you don't like his quarterback. I don't know who would. And Tua is really cheap, and I think this is one of those games where they're going to ask Tua to do something like he hasn't had to do basically all season long. Now, there's probably a small chance he gets relieved by Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I would love for Fitzpatrick to start this game, but I think Tua is sort of interesting for tournaments as well. Kyler Murray is just one of those talents that nobody's going to play, and nobody's playing Hopkins. It's just kind of interesting, and I don't know if people are saying the Bradbury stuff versus Hopkins, but just Hopkins is great. But Murray, ever since that injury, I don't know if it's correlation, causation, small sample, whatever it is, but he hasn't been running the ball so much of late. Maybe he's protecting his shoulder. Just nobody's going to play him. From a tournament perspective, Murray, Dalton, Tua, any of those guys do anything for you?
Tua is kind of interesting. The Dolphins have struggled to move the ball, really, just over 5 yards per play in one of his starts. But again, the game environment's good because last week in the second half, when he played arguably his best football to date, remember, Brian Flores went to more no huddle, which afforded Tua a season-high 39 pass attempts. And then Flores comes out on Monday and says he's going to run more no huddle this week. And so if we're getting up-tempo game script against the Chiefs' pass-happy offense, which, as we know, have passed at the league's highest rate in neutral game script, and with a lead even the past 5 games, that does seem pretty good. I also think it's a unique way, one, to get off DeAndre Washington, who I don't want to play in tournaments, and then 2, they're so cheap, Tua and his obvious bring back Mike Gesicki, that you can even go like Tyreek Hill or double stack Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins. Maybe if you want to go Devontae instead, no one's going to play him anyways, so you can go Kelsey and Tyreek Hill. So there's definitely ways you can double stack the standalone terrific options for the Chiefs without Mahomes and still get a game stack to that particular matchup. Also, before we move on, though, I love Brady and Kirk Cousins. Like, Kirk Cousins is one of my favorite plays on the entire board, and no one's talking about it, which seems odd because the Bucs before they ran into Mahomes, who pasted him for 460 and 3 touchdowns, they became a pass funnel. Like, they were seeding multiple touchdowns in over 200-yard games to even the likes of Teddy Bridgewater and Derek Carr. And like Daniel Jones, remember, Daniel Jones was on Monday night, and had he not just been a bad quarterback and overthrown Darius Slayton 5 times, they would have exploded against them. And Kirk Cousins, we've seen now 3 consecutive games with 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. we know they're going to try to run Dalvin Cook. We assume it's going to be ineffective, and thus game script will force Kirk Cousins to throw. And we've seen he can be uber efficient no matter the volume, even though he does have the volume, 42 and 45 pass attempts the past 2 games as well. So I love that game. I don't know how I'm attacking it just yet, but I will definitely have at least one player on both sides in my lineup.
I was just going to ask, is it Thielen, is it Jefferson? Do you have a lean? Because this is one of those deals where I can't figure it out. And on the Tampa Bay side, I just never get it right as far as Evans and Brown and Godwin. I was looking at the props. Looks like Brady's got like a 300-yard passing total. The juice is on the over for what it's worth, but that's still a pretty big number for a quarterback. Your favorite receiver on both sides as far as Minnesota, Tampa?
Mike Evans is the obvious one since, again, he's still commanding all the juicy targets we like. 16 red zone and end zone targets since Antonio Brown joined the lineup. In that time, Godwin and Brown have combined for only 2 red zone targets. He's basically, Evans has become Devontae Adams for the Bucs. He goes inside the 10-yard line, and they look to him every single time. So he's the obvious one. Although with a bye week instilled, I think Antonio Brown is the ancillary piece I'm also interested in for tournaments, even though he's not even that much cheaper than Evans. So it may not even be worth going down. I believe on DK he's only like $800 cheaper. For the other side though, the Vikings, Irv Smith, I feel like you have to play. Well, you don't have to play Cousins if you play Smith, but you're double stacking Cousins if you play Smith because it seems like he's going to get all the ownership as the cheapy tight end of the week, assuming we get Kyle Rudolph ruled out here. And then Irv Smith, of course, is declared active. But Jefferson in this spot is actually my favorite. He's still the big play guy, and he's reaching the end zone more because of these big plays. We know Thielen still has 13 more red zone and end zone targets since week 3 and the games they've played together since that time. But Jefferson now is popping more. And so if we're getting him more downfield targets and what I assume will be negative game script, I actually like him over Thielen this week.
I'm seeing it on DK for what it's worth. I think people are going to play Logan Thomas. That was a national game, okay, and he shined, and he's only $200 more if they can get there. Am I making this up? Did I not see a note that Irv might be a little bit limited? Is that something that's possibly out there?
I've seen 2 reports. I've seen he may be limited, but also that there was one more from early this morning saying that may not be the case. So we'll see it play out, and then if so, you can easily just get off him.
Yeah, I thought if he wasn't going to play and Rudolph is almost certainly not going to play, it could be Tyler Conklin. Yeah, who's a person. I just learned of his existence a few days ago, and he's 2.5K in DK. But by the way, we're not on tight end just yet, but I feel like I'm the only one that likes Cole Kmet this week.
No, Cole Kmet's good.
Yeah, I'm a Cole Kmet's 2.9K. I don't know if you need the dollars there necessarily, but go ahead.
It's not a 1-game sample. Like we see 7 targets to Jimmy Graham's 1 or whatever he had last week. It's a 3-game sample now where Cole Kmet has run more routes than Jimmy Graham. They've basically just taken Graham off the field and they finally passed the torch. So again, that's what we talk about every week on Wednesday is that I don't follow the cheap tight end chalk. You look around at that position for someone similar in a great spot who can go off at 20% less ownership. I think Cole Kmet's one of those guys. And I know everyone was shocked when I said it. I think Drew Sample's one of those guys too this week.
He's playing the Cowboys. Kmet had 95% snaps or something like that. It's in somewhere in the 90s, and he ran nobody ran more routes than him last week than except for Allen Robinson. I think he tied with Mooney at 33. So I think he's clearly taken over that role. And Jimmy Graham, it was a good run, but I think it's over pretty much. All right. Anything else as far as quarterback? You want to talk running back?
No, I think that's it. That's 7 or 8 players, but they're genuinely all good players. So it's more so than ever this week is just make sure you have all your ducks in a row.
All right. As far as our ownership, and we probably can, they can go ahead and see this on the screen. We're showing off some of the tools here at Lineup HQ. The show that follows us even branches out even more. They kind of dig in much more of a tournament perspective. They talk all the ownership and things like that. And again, if you want to use that at your own leisure, if you don't want to just kind of watch our screen, you can get yourself some core $4 or $5 off. The link's going to be dropped in chat for the people out there. Do want to mention before we kind of move on, if you want to get yourself free RG Premium and you don't even want to, get the $5 off, you just got to rock the Rotogrinders badge or rock the RG badge. You finished in the top 10 of certain contests. Information on this, as far as this, we dropped in chat as well. Finish the top 10 of certain contests, rock the RG badge. You get yourself I believe multiple months, maybe 2 or 3, possibly 1. I make no promises. Check the link. And added value, Daigle, you get a shout out on this show for those that are rocking the art. I don't know what
I get a shout out.
Well, if you rock the RG badge, feel free. Retail value for that is $19.99. Sure, there you go. That's the cost of a shout out. Rye Guy is rocking it. Just brand new signed up. We got Bleeding Green Silver. These are always kind of sort of tricky to read. These K-Fez, K-P-H-E-Z. That's K-Fez, maybe. Sure, that's what we're going with. And then C.L. Klerberg, C. Leberg 1. There you go, the original. All right. Do I hear Devin in my ear? What's up, Devin?
Next up is RG emojis. Like we can have your face with your glasses. People can send to us. We can have a Tuttle and a kimono. Like it'll be great.
That's like a Squirtle or something. Whatever the retail value of that is. That's a Pokemon reference, I believe. The only one I know. All right, let's talk some running backs. Hey, have you heard Derrick Henry is playing Jacksonville this week? Obviously you want to get some Derrick Henry in your life. Now he doesn't catch the football, but if he runs for 150 and 2 touchdowns, who cares? He's projected as our highest owned running back on the board at 31% on DK. Right under him is the aforementioned DeAndre Washington, still minimum 21%. J.D. McKissick, don't forget about him. Of course, there's no Gibson. Barber's probably going to be having those 2-yard rushes until they say, hey, we're losing, and let's start passing the ball to McKissick. And Montgomery. Dave Montgomery, man, I'm old enough to remember people hated Dave Montgomery. Now they like him, and he's facing Houston. A little more expensive on DK, but you can certainly pay that off as well. As far as the quote-unquote chalk running backs, that's the first 4. Henry feels really good. Washington, you said you want to fade him. I want you to kind of dive into that in tournaments specifically. But hit on Washington and Henry first.
Well, again, he's going to have to score a touchdown to pay off even 4K. We know if they get in a negative game script, which is always a chance against Mahomes, Patrick Laird actually, as their pass catching back, will come on the field. And this has happened no matter who the back is, multiple times for Miami this year. So I just don't think people are truly comprehending the game script for DeAndre Washington going awry very, very quickly. So I'm not too worried about DeAndre Washington. Again, like everyone's thinking the same thing. You pay down. So if you can get unique towards it, sure. But everyone's thinking you pay down for DeAndre Washington, the Stone Men, then you come right back up in a run back with Tyreek Hill or Kelsey or one of them in Mahomes. So if everyone's thinking the same thing, of course, not even really unique for a Stone minimum running back. And I don't think he has the workhorse, like we talked about, the workhorse bell cow role that makes him worth it at Stone Men. I understand we need values in the slate. Like we have to have them, but I still prefer ancillary options, not catching ownership in high totals like this one, like Jasicki even, as opposed to DeAndre Washington here. That's just my thought process on it.
Yeah, and there are other quote-unquote value running backs that we can sort of pivot to, like Gio Bernard. He's one of those hold-your-nose guys, but he's also facing Dallas, and he gets, 3/4 of the snaps, something like that, give or take. Duke Johnson, David Johnson out once again. They're without Cooks, presumably. I assume that's a Rappaport. Has that been confirmed by everybody, or is that just Rappaport?
So there are conflicting reports this morning, which makes that game really interesting now. Ian Rappaport says that Brandon Cooks is out. Adam Schefter still thinks he's going to play.
Oh, boy. I mean, If you had to guess. I
don't now, but I do know that if Rap Sheet's been wrong a few times this year, but I do know that if Cooks plays, I'm probably now right back on him even heavier, because that means that maybe people will be scared he is injured. So I'll bring back Cooks and Montgomery for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and Cooks got rattled last week too. I don't know, is that related to what happened to him last week, or is it something else?
Perhaps, and of course that would be his 6th concussion in as many seasons in the league, I believe. But remember, he got pulled off to be evaluated and actually returned. And who knows, maybe it's the Sunday morning pregnancy test that they give every NFL player instead of the COVID test, so we can all play these games on Sunday. But I believe he's just fine since he played the second half.
Has anybody tested positive on Sunday?
It's not allowed. It's illegal, Dean.
Okay, I feel like that hasn't happened. Des Bryant did. Like on that was on a Thursday.
That wasn't Sunday though. Yeah, midweek it's okay. Sunday morning you got to slip them the different test.
We touched on Eckler. Yeah, that's the only reason why I like the Washington thing. But maybe Miami just abandons the run. I know you can run the ball on KC. That's not necessarily optimal. You can get your 4 and 5 yard chunks. If we're going to use the word chunk, that's probably a liberal interpretation of the word chunk. But you know what I'm saying. You're probably not going to beat KC that way either. James Robinson, just by sheer volume, certainly interesting. Carson, if you believe he's going to get a little more usage, or just the matchup there is good. Obviously, big home favorite against the Jets. And I think one of the more interesting tournament plays today, feel free to have any thoughts on that, but Aaron Jones, like if you're moving away, if you think Green Bay is going to score those 4 or 5 touchdowns, and maybe Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a chance to be a greedy Gus, like Aaron Jones runs in like a 13-yard touchdown or something like that. It's a nice matchup on the turf there against Detroit, big favorite as well. It's going to cost you, and it just makes more sense to play Henry. And we kind of mentioned Cook in passing from an ownership perspective, just sort of like playing randomness. He's a phenomenal play. We've been playing the last so many weeks, and nobody's going to play him because he's facing Tampa and their pass funnel and yada, yada. But like you said, Minnesota is going to try to get him the ball 25 times. Your thoughts on those guys as far as tournaments? You got Carson, Jones, Robinson by sheer volume against Tennessee. Anybody pop out for you?
Everyone, honestly. So Aaron Jones, what do you have on his ownership on your end? Because, I mean, if you're saying, we know Devontae Adams is going to be the highest owned, but if you're saying that Aaron Jones is a good tournament play because of the ownership, like, I don't think Aaron Jones is even leverage. I just think he's a damn good play that could easily outscore Derrick Henry today.
So Jamino and his team, they may work on this all the way up the lock, obviously, and the numbers get more and more refined and more perfected. But as of right now, we're looking at around 13-ish% on FanDuel and DK.
Really interesting. Really, really interesting. I didn't know that. Okay. I may have to go to him. So yeah, Aaron Jones, remember, I know we're citing the snap counts and the touch shares and everything, but not only got there last week, of course, even though that's his role ahead of Jamal Williams. It always has been. But remember, the last time he played the Lions earlier this year, he went nuts for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's a terrific spot again that even we've seen David Montgomery be very successful in. So yeah, I mean, Aaron Jones is just an outright amazing play. And what I talked about at the beginning of the show was that him and Devontae Adams catching so much ownership that you can't, in my opinion, play them one-offs. You have to bring it back with a Lion. Like if you're telling me Aaron Jones 10 to 13%, I don't even think that's high. I think that's fine. You could play him as a one-off. So that makes it really interesting because we know where ownership is going to go. It's going to go to Derrick Henry, and to a much lesser extent, if some people want to pay up at that spot, Dalvin Cook, who I also even consider Dalvin Cook interesting if he was going to come in at 5 to 8%, whereas Derrick Henry is going to catch 20 to 30. And I still think the Titans passing game is the better overall play than Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's a great play. Don't get me wrong. We've talked about it in the past, though, whereas the Jaguars corners are falling apart and crumbling on the 3rd and 4th string guys now. The Jaguars front 7 is holding tight. In the past month, they've only been run over by Nick Chubb when Wyatt Teller came back in the lineup. But even last week, it took Dalvin Cook a career-high 32 carries, a career-high 38 touches to get over 120 yards in overtime. They stuffed Aaron Jones 4 weeks ago. So I think Jaguars front 7 is still holding their own, and there's no guarantee that Derrick Henry gets there in this slate. So yeah, I prefer Aaron Jones to Derrick Henry in tournaments.
Yeah, I'm just pulling the ownership stuff up right now. And Cook, 5% we're seeing on DK. Also, Zeke Elliott at 5%. If you believe he is healthy and fine and good to go against Cincinnati, that just seems like a really interesting. And also, he's priced down. He's 6.6K. Like, yep. He's probably not going to play 85, 90% of the snaps, but I can see him around 70 or so. Pollard is a competent backup. One of my favorite pivots in the slate, if you're to buy in the coach speak, and hopefully if he doesn't fumble the ball, and he's a big home favorite, and they have a 30 team total, and they're facing an inferior defense, I don't understand why. I mean, I understand it because there's a quote unquote better plays out there, or better math plays out there, but why are most people just ignoring Ronald Jones? He seems like a really interesting tournament play for me.
So it's because the volatility, right? Everyone assumes that it's an ambiguous situation with Bruce Arians. But again, those are situations we love. These are ones we attack. And it's not like the Rams ambiguous were previous Rams, I should say, before they finally got their head out of their asses and played Cam Akers. It's a 2-man committee. There's only one. It's a coin flip. There's only 2 ways Bruce Arians can go. It's not a 3-headed one. And last week we saw Ronald Jones had the only first half touchdown for the Bucs, 37-yard receiving score, only got 1 target the rest of the game. Third quarter, he burst up the middle for a 34-yard run, doesn't get a carry the rest of the half. It's just, so it's volatile, of course, but again, we're trying to get the touchdown equity, and you're not playing Evans or Brady. In my Kirk Cousins double stacks, and again, this could change, it's still early, but I do have Ronald Jones coming back. He's not going to get any ownership, and as you mentioned, this is one of 3 teams with an implied total over 30 points in a game that's continuing to take the juice on the over. So I like Ronald Jones a whole lot today.
Yeah, and Arians is coming out saying like we got to get him, dude. We got to get him 25 touches, as if he's not the guy responsible. Like
Yeah.
it's his fault. Whoever find the guy who's not getting this guy.
He's like, Ronald Jones has to get 20 touches. Who the hell do you think is in charge of that, Bruce? Like, there's only one man commanding that.
Other guys are just sort of. I just can't. I'm not. I don't think I'm getting to Jonathan Taylor this week. I just don't. I think he's fine. I just don't think I'm getting there. DK for the price in FanDuel. He's 5-8 on DK. He's 7 on FanDuel. So I get there. It's probably be a DK. But, you can't roster everybody. I'm not running out 150. Anybody else that's kind of sort of somewhat interesting there?
Like Jonathan Taylor and Mike Davis are the two guys I think are amazing plays that I won't have any of. And I'll look up and they'll probably like 25 points and I'll get pissed off. But I just cannot seem to fit them. This Raiders-Colts game I think goes over. I bet the team total for the Colts on Monday early because it's a terrific spot. And again, in their last 2 games together, since Jonathan Taylor was sandwiched in on the COVID list for a quick stint there last week or 2 weeks ago, he's out-touched Naheem Hines 42-18. He is not a bell cow, but he's a workhorse now with left tackle Anthony Costanzo coming back, and they should just mow the Raiders. I would like to find a spot to bring it back. I never like the box score and point chase, but Darren Waller seems to make the most sense, not only because everyone will go up to Kelsey if you have that much money, and they won't play Waller, but also we saw that even Kiki QT exposed the Matt Eberflus' zone scheme, and that's what's going to happen with Darren Waller. He's going to get pelted underneath for 12-plus targets. So it's also a high-floor spot for Waller if you're playing Taylor. But again, there are so many other good plays here, just that unfortunately, although I do genuinely love him this week, I just don't think I'm going to be able to play him here.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things where it's a 52 total, and it feels like that Colts-Raiders game is just lost on the slate. Like yep. Jacobs, people didn't know if he was going to play, if he's not going to play. Reports are he is going to give it a go for what it's worth. And nobody likes to play Colts whack-a-mole. Like, it's just like, I don't know which receiver, I don't know which running back, but Taylor seems like the best. I mean, he's another guy just not getting the volume you want. Like, he was just super efficient last week, caught like a 40-yard touchdown pass. If you didn't get that, you're obviously bummed. Waller went absolutely nuts last week. It's just, and nobody likes to roster Rivers or Carr, or maybe that's just me. I don't want, that's kind of a starting point. It's like, I don't want to stack maybe an a la carte play. I don't mind, Waller's an a la carte play, or even Taylor. Otherwise, any other running backs before we talk about some receivers? Anybody else do anything for you?
No, you mentioned no one likes to play Carr. Like, no one now think of running back to Carr. Like, Carr's 1 week as the overall QB1, and now like we're gonna chase that. Like, no, maybe another spot, but not for me.
One more promo to get to before we talk about some receivers. PrizePicks. Get yourself 3 months free of RG Premium if you use our link. $100 deposit bonus as well, up to $50. Use the promo code Grinders. And I picked a couple. You tell me if you like this as we kind of segue into receivers as far as fantasy points. Devontae Parker, it's just over/under. You're like over, you're like under. Devontae Parker at 12.5.
Fantasy points?
Yeah. Full point PPR.
So he needs to score a touchdown. I'll go over.
All right, so I got the over on Devontae Parker at 12.5, and I also picked the over. Spoiler alert there. I mean, feel free to go under if you want, but Robbie Anderson at 16. No more, obviously, for the Carolina side, and also worth noting that the Denver defense is without 2 of their top corners in the secondary. Are you with me as far as over 16?
Oh, yeah. We know they throw the ball, and then also they have no interest. They proved it already. They have no interest in the Brandon Zylstras and Ian Thomases of the world. Like, all of the fallback, all of the vacated targets trickle down to Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, and Mike Davis, and that's it.
Derek Carty, who does the Blitz, was talking about how absolutely breaking the system. He hasn't seen it this high as far as Devontae Adams, what he's projected for today. And we've already talked about what a premium spot he is. He's super expensive. And I think you should try to prioritize him in cash on DK and on FanDuel. I feel like that's the optimal move. What about tournaments? Of course, he can get beat by, there's a slew of guys that can beat him. Tyreek, Metcalf, who's going to be severely under-owned in comparison to Adams. How do you feel about Adams in tournaments?
I love him. Again, I think it's a terrific spot that Green Bay set up in the highest total of the week in the afternoon. So if anything, I feel like you need to make the cash in your flex spot in most of your stacks for Devontae Adams, and then you can see how your lineup does in the noon games and choose to late swap and pivot from there. But Devontae Adams, like, I mean, there's nothing to say. He's going to smash today. It's just a matter of, can you fit him in with a unique lineup the rest of the way? Again, we were talking about Aaron Jones. I think he's a terrific leverage play off of Devontae Adams, especially if he's going to come in 30 or 40% less rostered. That seems insane because it's just as good a spot. Like, even if they want to get the ball to Devontae Adams, one carry is all it takes for Aaron Jones to ruin the drive because he explodes for a 60-yard touchdown multiple times. We've seen it before. So, yeah, I think Devontae Adams, of course, is great, but I think Aaron Jones is also a terrific leverage. I'm going to get pieces of that game no matter what. And then if you want the cheaper option, if everyone's going to play, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, your Rashad Perrymans, your Jets receivers in general, cheaper options elsewhere, I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling is just as good of a play if you're double stacking Aaron Rodgers. No one's going to roster him. He's in the same game. Alan Lazard, that Matt LaFleur said he's going to continue limiting Alan Lazard. Of course, like, Alan Lazard still played like 69% of the snaps, I believe, last week. He's not really limited, but Valdes-Scantling is running more routes and 12 personnel. And so we know he's going to get at least one 60-yard bomb. It's going to come down to if he drops it or not, his weekly drop. But I think he's an amazing play that no one's going to be on.
If he drops it, Rodgers is going to give him that stink eye.
For like 30 seconds, too. He just stared him down.
I'm seeing some questions in chat. I'm not sure if these are like season-long people because I believe it's the playoffs for a season.
First round of season-long playoffs. Yeah, it's a busy weekend.
Yeah. Hey, if you guys are in the chat, if you're on there watching us on YouTube, feel free to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, the whole deal. This is a tricky one, so I'm going to hand it off to you. Jonathan Taylor or Swift?
It's Jonathan Taylor. So the way I'm handling Swift is, although I like him, there's no need to risk it whenever you have a player who has a solidified floor and ceiling. Like, Jonathan Taylor's amazing play as well. So why even risk, like, let's say the potential RB5 on the week when you have the RB8 on the week already? Like, don't even overthink it. That's why I love doing all these different shows. Like the season long, we do shout out to us an hour before kickoff. I'll be on like the NBC Sports YouTube doing start sits for the Roto World live show, nice. Answering season long questions. But then, like, we do our show like on Wednesdays, and it's totally different games, totally different mindset. Whereas, like, I'm willing to take on risk for immediate return as opposed to season long, which is more like season long baseball analytics where you're just trying to play it correctly every single week. So yeah, I think you have Taylor. Don't even sweat it. Don't worry about it.
A couple of my favorite plays, dollar for dollar. Okay, so the Carolina receivers, Curtis Samuel's 5'2", Robbie Anderson 6'2". Do you have a preference amongst those two when you consider salary?
I prefer Robbie Anderson, and you can tell me what the ownerships will be. But DJ Moore vacates pretty much Robbie Anderson's role. I don't think they're going to use Curtis Samuel differently. He'll probably will get a few more targets here and there, but in my opinion, they'll still be shallow targets. So Robbie Anderson still has the ceiling here. And we've seen before, Robbie Anderson, it's always been the targets every single week. They just jam him double digits. It's been a matter of him scoring touchdowns. But now he has the Broncos, of course, missing both starting cornerbacks. The Broncos missing also, like, their starting left tackle apparently this week, which makes Carolina's defense a good play all of a sudden. And then, yeah, so Carolina should be able to run up the score, and Robbie Anderson is the guy they would take shots to downfield over Curtis Samuel.
By the way, another guy kind of like in the middle of those two prices on DK is Corey Davis. And you alluded to it as far as that Tennessee pivot. If you're going to move away from Henry, and, you know, that Jacksonville front seven is probably better than the back end as far as defensively. And, yeah, if nobody's going to, I mean, I wouldn't say nobody, but few people are going to play Tannehill, and Brown is the more, bigger upside pairing, I suppose, at least in theory, but not necessarily. And, Davis is a late bloomer. He's a guy who people have loved for years. But 5'7", I think, is a pretty appealing price. DK specific, your thoughts as far as Davis?
Oh, yeah, of course. Ryan Tannehill, because I know because I rostered him everywhere last week. He was 7% rostered in like high stakes, mid stakes. And so now imagine a better game environment, a very similar total, since we said earlier, Titans have the fourth highest implied team total on this slate. And all of these other quarterbacks there. Like, Ryan Tannehill is going to go completely overlooked. I would imagine like 3 to 5%. No one's going to play him. Everyone will one-off Corey Davis. Less people will play A.J. Brown. Both of them all three of them are tremendous plays off of Derrick Henry.
You like Shark as a run back in that game?
Shark, I am one-offing even if I'm not playing that game. Shark is my favorite wide receiver for tournaments on this slate.
Oh wow! I was not expecting that bold of an answer.
I love Shark today.
Why has he been so bad? Like for a while now, he came back from injury and he's had like one good game in like the last 6 or 7 weeks. Like, why is this the week?
Well, so remember, they didn't have Mike Glennon fearlessly chunking deep balls for a while there. They had Jake Luton, who played like Jake Luton. He played like a 6th-round quarterback who should be a career backup. Glennon, though, we've seen the past 2 weeks at least, not only locks onto Shark, but he's thrown a league-high 16 attempts, 20-plus yards downfield. He's literally not scared to attack a Titans secondary that has no pass rush whatsoever. They are not getting to anyone, hence why Baker Mayfield was only pressured on 1 drop back last week. It wasn't because of play action. It's because the Titans don't have the talent to get there since everyone's injured. This Titans second corner, Breon Borders, also missing today, along with Adoree Jackson. So, yeah, Mike Glennon, you can't play him on this slate, but it's just a good reason to get exposure to DJ Shark, who still ran 44 routes on Glennon's 48 dropbacks last week. He was on the field nearly every snap. So, yeah, he's an amazing play today.
That secondary piece for Tennessee, is that the one that just broke today? Because I don't recognize the name. Somebody supposedly is out that just is new news because they're sick for Tennessee. Did you see that, or was that one of the guys you mentioned?
No, that wasn't the guy I mentioned. I didn't know another secondary piece got sick. Interesting.
Yeah. Unless I thought it was new news, and I'm not gonna. I don't know every team's like 11 defensive players. I know.
I don't either. I just know a few people now. I'm gonna look this up though really quick while you're talking.
I think Tennessee is without one of their secondary pieces for what it's worth. We're assuming we know Mims is out for the Jets. We're assuming Crowder is probably going to be out as well, which is why we're talking about Rashad Perryman, even Barrios at still minimum 3K. Even Jeff Smith is not completely insane. Not a ton of necessarily like touchdown equity because we're looking at like a 16 total here against Seattle. I do think Gallup at a similar price on DK is probably in contention. It's a conversation versus Perryman. Do you have a take as far as Gallup versus Perryman? And did I give you enough time to find the news that I may or may not have got?
It's a big one actually. Kenny Vaccaro is like an important part of that secondary. They're starting safety, so that actually I love Shark already. That makes it even more confident. Honestly, that's great. So Rashad Perryman, I love. The usage has been there. The air yards, unlike Denzel Mims, like I feel like Denzel Mims air yards are like John Hightower, AJ Green air yards, and that they're just fake. They're the prayer yards we talk about. There's no chance those balls get there. Jerry Jeudy also living on prayer yards right now. The ball's never going to get there. They're just chunked deep and extremely inaccurate towards them. Whereas Rashad Perryman, not only just an outright baller, but like he's been on target. He's playing the boundary every single snap. Sam Darnold, Joe Flacco, they have been connecting with him, and he still is tied for the team lead end zone targets since Jamison Crowder returned. So even if Crowder played, I think Perryman is still the better play in this spot. We know we should attack Seattle on the sideline. So I think he's a great play today. Again, though, I imagine he's going to probably be popular. You can tell me what you have on that end, but I would think he's like everyone's favorite cheapy option under 4K at wide receiver.
All right, pulling it up now as far as our cheap receivers, as far as the asking price. DK specific 3.9 Perryman is projected to be 15% owned.
Okay.
Barrios at 9% for what it's worth. And that's under the assumption, I assume, that Crowder is out. Hansen is getting some ownership for Houston, Hansen and QT under the assumption that Cooks is out. Obviously, actives and inactives come out an hour and a half before lock, so this stuff will change. If news changes, you were going to say?
I was going to say, yeah, Hansen's interesting. Of course, ownership will probably change here now that we're waiting on Cooks. We'll see Hansen and QT both increase. QT's the safer play there, but there's a chance that just the Texans implode, even with Deshaun Watson. Like, maybe they just cannot move the ball at all. Duke Johnson, we've seen him be ineffective, and the 3 starts without David Johnson. So, like, who do they even go to? Like, will Watson lean on Akins? Like, are they just going to dump it down to QT? It doesn't even make sense. So I worry about that game total now if Cooks doesn't play.
I like the Bears defense a little bit, and I think it's also going to be really cold. I know we don't really care so much about cold as far as the players are just, it's cold. Like, who wants to be outside when it's freezing? Yeah. Like, I know we talk about wind. Wind matters the most when it comes to weather, but but they are still favored unless that changed. Is that correct? Houston's still a slight favorite over Chicago, or has that moved at all?
It wouldn't make sense. It may have moved though. I can look it up real quick as well.
Yeah. Hey, chat's talking about why not Keenan Allen in cash? Sure. I don't think he just kind of didn't fit my build. If I land on it, like as a last man in, I'm fine with Allen. He gets plenty of targets, obviously. on the other side, we both like Ridley as well. I have nothing bad to say about Keenan Allen. As far as the way the salary stuff worked and the way the build worked, I didn't get there. Is there any other receivers? Thoughts on Keenan Allen, if you want to kind of cover that up? And I think Lamb at 4.8 is pretty interesting. It's kind of sort of popping. We should mention, worth noting, this game, Washington at San Fran is in a dome in Arizona. A bump to the receivers. Talk about how domes definitely help games from an over perspective. Ayuk is he's really cheap on Yahoo. He's like $14 over there. McLaurin is going to be lost on this slate, but for sure he's interesting for tournaments. Do you like any of these cheap Denver receivers, or is it all sort of fool's gold nonsense because nobody's playing anybody in Denver? Maybe they shouldn't be.
I don't know if I love them, but one, definitely, you're right. No one's going to play them. I think Carolina's defense is still a tremendous play today. But if I had to choose one, it's Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick, like, his box score's all messed up because he's been injured, he's been ejected, and he's played a full game with Kendall Hinton since week 6. But anytime he's been on the field for a full game, he's not only seen 6 targets and or multiple touchdowns in every single one of those games, he's just been better. He has a proven rapport with Drew Lock, and Reeves had the stats in past weeks. We've seen that Drew Lock in the fourth quarter shines, and that's most of the time when he's thrown them out of the game through the first 3 quarters. So Drew Lock, just like he did against the Falcons and won slates that week, can absolutely get there on limited time and negative game script. So if I had to choose one, it's probably Tim Patrick. If you want to get a little unique, it would be Noah Fant, but I think I prefer Tim Patrick among the whole group.
Let's see, a couple of questions in chat. Who is this DeAndre Washington, and why is he popping in my optimizers? It's because Gaskins is out, and he's more or less the last man standing there in Miami. Did you think, hypothetically, Miami's down by 2 touchdowns, late third quarter? Is it Washington back there, or is it Laird back there?
It would be Laird.
Yeah, that's a slight concern for me to some degree, but not that, I just can't imagine playing Laird. It just seems kind of thin, but there is a scenario where he catches like 7 or 8 balls and gets in the end zone.
Like if they changed their rules all of a sudden this morning and said Laird's 3K, Washington's 4K, I'd probably play Laird, but both 4K, no, you can't play Laird.
That extra 1K really, it truly matters.
It would be amazing. It would be incredible if they would be so kind.
CEH is just like forgotten. Remember how much people love this guy? Like, week 1, week 2, week 3. And last week it was super goofy where he was sick and he was active and then I don't think he played a snap, right? Like I guess he was an emergency play. Just nobody's going to play him. And he's what, 5.9K? Just that might be the cheapest he's been all season long. Just, I think it's worth throwing it out there. It's kind of like, a head nod and acknowledgement. They do have Bell now. We get a little more work. We do have to move on, though. As far as any other receivers, anybody do anything for you? Shall we talk about some tight ends?
I think we've talked about a lot of them. You're going to have to parse through the expensive ones because all of them, from DK to Keenan Allen to Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, like they're all good plays. Like they're all in amazing spots. We haven't seen this before at all this year. So just get your game stacks right is all it is, because literally everyone you play today is probably in a terrific spot.
T.Y. Hilton or Chark? I think we both prefer Chark over T.Y., right?
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton's also in a good spot. I am biased and just can't trust T.Y. Hilton. Like through week 12, he was dead. And then he was the Undertaker gift the past 2 weeks. So I just can't trust him yet. And it's, like I said, it's probably my own personal biases.
And it's a turf game. I don't know if turf games are still a thing. We like the home turf games. This isn't
of course
in Vegas. But I'm with you. Like, and also I think he's on the wrong side of 30. If I'm not mistaken. He's in the back 9. All right, let's talk about some tight ends. Kelsey for sure. Obviously, if you have the salary, it's hard to figure out how much I'm prioritizing. And we didn't talk about Hill. Like, of course you can play Hill. Like, of course. Mm-hmm. And Metcalf, we got to mention in passing. Those guys are still really, really strong tournaments. If you're going to roster, well, we kind of mentioned the KC, but you're starting a lineup with either Hill or you're starting a lineup with or with Hill or Kelsey. Which premium KC piece do you prefer? I know you like both.
In tournaments, it would be Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelsey is probably going to come in. Well, I had to sneeze. My allergies since I moved back to Texas are really bad. Travis Kelsey, of course, will probably come in higher owned. And it's like the opportunity cost as well. I totally get it. Like, he just wins his position every single week. It's not even worth trying to punt. Well, in cash games, I still punt tight end at DraftKings for very cheap. But we know Travis Kelsey is going to finish 1 or 2 at his position every single week. He's, again, in a terrific game environment. But if he's going to catch the most ownership in tournaments, I will then go to Tyreek Hill, who Remember, they were jamming him targets. Like 3 games before last week, it was like 18, 14, and 11, I believe. A 30% target share in every single game. And last week, he not only had one touchdown negated, but another one that he accidentally caught, and they didn't review it. So, like, he's in a great bounce back spot here.
You just willed that sneeze away. That was you're like a professional. That was super impressive.
Working professional.
Logan Thomas, on the turf, on the comeback, presumably, and still super cheap there on DK at 3.3K. If you want to pivot, you like the Green Bay offense, or you want to double stack with Rodgers, Tunyon is still pretty cheap. Ingram, is another guy that, he's getting a ton of targets, and he's still relatively cheap as well. Hawkinson is a bring back as far as that Green Bay side. If we think Cooks is going to be out, we'll know that soon enough. Another UCF player, Perryman. Now, the proud of UCF, Jordan Akins is still kind of sort of somewhat interesting. I don't know how well that offense is going to function, to be honest. They're talking about Henry in the chat. Henry and Hurst are both kind of sort of somewhat interesting tight ends in that Chargers Atlanta game. Schultz is cheap, and I still think Kmet is a little interesting, and Gesicki is a bring back for Kansas City. Jonnu Smith is back too, for what it's worth. Hopefully I gave you enough time to gather yourself and will that sneeze away. Of all those names I threw out there, who was interesting?
I'm just pounding allergy medicine. By the way, no one cares about this, but then I come back to Texas to play winter golf, and now every time I get on the golf course, that's what brings the allergies back. It's so bad in the mornings. Anyways, though, side point, that's a privileged life. So the cheap options, my only issue, and like I said, I've been touting Drew Sample, Irv Smith if he's not limited, these other guys. The only thing is these are all floor plays. I doubt Sample has 2 touchdowns in his bag. I highly doubt it. So Waller, Kelsey, Gesicki, for all the reasons you mentioned earlier with Tua and the up-tempo game environment, and you liking him as just a cheap pivot on that game to be unique off of DeAndre Washington as well. It's really interesting in that range. I don't think Gesicki or Hawkinson is going to catch much ownership, and they should, because they are the secondary pieces. Robert Tunyon as well, that we've been talking about, that no one's going to play because they're so focused on the more expensive pieces in those games. And of course, Aaron Rodgers could throw 2 touchdowns at Tunyon. So yeah, I think all of them are good options. And as I say every week on the Wednesday show, just game stack your tight end. Just make sure, even if it's a run back, that's how you're playing it. I would not one-off tight ends unless it's showdown or like these COVID 2-game, 3-game slates on Monday and Tuesdays.
Highest variance spot defense. Who's jumping out for you? For me, up top, it's New Orleans. I think Hurts is going to take a fair bit of sacks, but I also think he's interesting. But it's one of those deals where I like it from both ends. I think Hurts, I'm going to have a piece in tournaments, but I also think he might get sacked like 7 or 8 or 9 times. That wouldn't surprise me either. Seattle in the mid-tier, depending on where you're shopping. I think Seattle's $5K on FanDuel, but really, really strong price on DK at $3K versus the Jets. Really no reason to dig into that. And the Cowboys on the low, just because they're facing, Cincinnati, and, there's a high variance spot. Any thoughts on those defenses? Anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah, so Saints, if you can get up to them. DK, it's always really hard to get up. That's why they typically go under rostered. But again, Hurts, rushing quarterbacks historically take more sacks. So the floor of the Saints is safe, not to mention they're a nightmare. So the ceiling is pretty safe too. But again, it's really hard on this slate. We're trying to find and take risk on these cheap options. Like now imagine paying up $3,800 for a defense. It's just super tough. You mentioned the Bears at $3K, which are definitely palatable. I like that a lot if Brandon Cooks is in fact out, because the Texans offense could just tank. I think the Panthers are one of the best plays on the entire slate, because not only are the Broncos missing their left tackle this morning, it's of course Drew Lock. So we have multiple chances for turnovers and defensive touchdowns. The cheap is the Cowboys that I like a lot, because we've seen Brandon Allen consistently under pressure. He could even throw a touchdown or 2, but Cowboys defense, assuming they just haven't given up on the year, could easily get there. And they're a good correlation with Zeke if you want to go that route. And then if you want to get really frisky, like really, really cheap, the Jets are right there. They just changed the defensive coordinator. There is absolutely a chance Seattle's offense fails today. I don't think they do, but it's 100% possible, because I really think Pete Carroll's going to come out, try to establish Chris Carson for this quote-unquote full load he keeps talking about, since Carson is now apparently fully healthy for the first time since he returned from injury in the last 3 games. And we know the Jets front 7 is great. They limited opposing running backs to the 7th fewest fantasy points on the season so far. And so Carson won't be successful and thus Seattle will have to punt the ball. And we've seen also the past 5 games, Russ leads the league in quarterback hits taken, and he has 7 turnovers in that span. So I think it's more than possible the Jets get there.
Daigle, we're up against the clock. We got to go, but tell the people where they can find you and give them your favorite correlation play of the day.
You can find me playing golf and getting allergies in Texas, but then also you can find me at NotJDaigle on Twitter, rotoworld.com. I will be back in an hour on NBC Sports, YouTube, and then the RotoWorld account with start-sit questions, if that's your kind of thing and you want to tune in for season long, the first round of playoffs. And then my favorite correlation is, let's go Ronald Jones and Justin Jefferson, Zeke and Cowboys defense, Perryman and Metcalf, or DJ Shark as your run back for any Titan stacks.
Love it. All right. Waiting in the wings in the bullpen, we got Tambo and Stevie in between us. I imagine you're going to see
the Shark guys.
There you go. You're going to see a beer maker 6-pack. I imagine that's kind of loaded up. We got to go. We're taking you guys all up the lock. Don't go anywhere. Hit the like and subscribe. I was going to say out the door. We're out the door. You guys are sticking around because there's more coverage of 2 hours more to go. He's Daigle. I was Dean. This is football. We're out of here. Good luck. Holler.
Week 14 is here, and I'm back with 6 of my favorite plays, including a couple of workhorse running backs. I'm going to be jamming in my lineups. What value tight end am I looking at this week? And my favorite quarterback receiver pairing for Week 14. Who is it? Belly up to the fantasy bar and find out. Welcome back, loyal bar patrons. Week 14 is here, and I'm here with 6 of my favorite plays covering both FanDuel and DraftKings. Thank you, as always, for stopping by the fantasy bar. Now, guys, as always, before we get started this week, do me a favor. Click that thumbs up button on YouTube. That is our tip jar. The video absolutely free. That's all we ask of you is hit that thumbs up button and make sure you subscribe to the channel and get notified when the videos are coming out. Now, before we look at Week 14, let's take a quick look back at Week 13. Some good, some bad. Obviously, a big miss with Austin Eckler. That game got away from the Chargers very quickly, and even in garbage time, he wasn't able to put up numbers. And Evan Ingram, also a disappointment. Kind of mad with our Chicago stack of Trubisky and Robinson. The touchdowns went via the running backs, but a big hit on our value skinny stack there with Jonathan Taylor and Kiki Cutie. Now, let's move on to Week 14 here. Looks like a fun slate, big slate of games here. No more buys on the docket, so let's jump in at the running back position. We're going to go right back to Chicago here with David Montgomery. Now, I liked him last week. We mentioned him on the show. We liked the passing game there, but Montgomery was in a good spot, and guess what? He's in a good spot here once again this week. And the thing that really stood out to me, the pricing here on David Montgomery. We're talking about a guy that gets almost 100% of the work. I know Cordero Patterson works in and gets some of that work there for Chicago, but we're talking about a true workhorse running back here, and we are paying middling prices here in the mid-6s to get that. So I'm going to be all over that here once again with David Montgomery. Another thing that stood out, ownership. Early ownership projections, not nearly as high as I thought they'd be here in this matchup for a guy playing as well as he has. We're talking about a guy averaging almost 28 DraftKings points per game over these last 2 matchups against Green Bay and Detroit. Well, guess what? It's another juicy matchup here with Houston, allowing the second most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So once again, a fan of this Bears offense. I don't hate Trubisky. We're not going to go back there here again in the 6-pack this week, but I do love the spot for David Montgomery against the Houston Texans. All right, let's go to the wide receiver position. A guy I think's been a lot better than you realize, and that's Brandon Ayuk of the Niners. Now we know that Niners offense, they're without their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. They're without their huge weapon in George Kittle. Deebo Samuel, a little bit banged up here. I'm expecting him to play. But the point is, Brandon Ayuk playing some great football. Kind of took a little while to get acclimated, dealt with some COVID issues. But over his last 4 games played, 40 targets in that span. And a lot of those games with Nick Mullins, a guy we know is going to put the ball in the air and make things happen. So Ayuk finding the end zone as well, touchdowns in 3 straight games. But this guy has been a model of consistency. If you're looking for a guy in cash games, the target should be enough for you. If not, how about the 21 DraftKings points per game he has put up over the last 4? Consistency is there. touchdowns have been there, and I think we get a ceiling game here as well. Brandon Ayuk, add it all up. Great price here on DraftKings. It's going to be a big part of my builds here in week 14. All right, let's stay in that mid-range. Let's save you some more money at tight end. Mike Gesicki of the Dolphins. So a big matchup here for Miami. I'm really looking forward to this game against Kansas City. And we know Miami at their heart wants to run the ball. They want to play some defense. Obviously want to keep Patrick Mahomes and company on the sidelines. The problem is I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. Kansas City projected for 4 touchdowns in this game, so it may force Miami to throw a little bit more than they want to, and that'll be good news here for Gesicki. We know Devontae Parker, the alpha there, but Gesicki's really become the 1B to Parker's 1A. Season high in both targets and receptions last week. Looked great, gets a lot of red zone targets, second on the team in red zone targets this season. And the Chiefs, this is a position they have struggled with. They've been pretty good against wide receivers. So, you know, Parker going to get a lot of that defensive attention. You know, Gaskin going to be a focus as well. I think that's going to mean good things and good opportunities here for Mike Gesicki. Second most fantasy points allowed over the last month here by Kansas City to the tight end position. Prices are fair here. Upside is huge. Love Mike Gesicki in the spot against Kansas City. All right, back to the running back position. Promised you 2 workhorses. We gave you Montgomery. We're going to go to my boy in Jacksonville, James Robinson. Now, you guys know I love me some J-Rob here. A guy that just gives you a great floor. In fact, 10 or more DraftKings points in every single game this season. So really giving you that floor you're looking for. And we know the ceiling is there as well. Guy that's put up many games in the 20s, and he's also gotten some games into the 30s. And I think this is a spot he could attack that 30 DraftKings point threshold. We look back all the way back to week 2 when barely any of us knew who the hell James Robinson was. 6.4 yards per carry against this Tennessee defense, and they have not done anything to make that defense better. In fact, I think it's gotten worse as we've gone along, and we just look at the last 4 weeks, giving up over 31 points per game here are the Titans. So I know this Jacksonville offense, not the most explosive offense out there, but the playmakers at wide receiver should help. DJ Chark back in that lineup should help, and this defense is that bad. James Robinson should be in a good spot here once again against this Titans defense. Moving on, pick number 5 here in week 14 of the 6-pack. We're going to go to the wide receiver position with Michael Thomas of the Saints. So pricing really stood out here. We're continuing to buy low on these Saints. Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, we saw bounce back a little bit last week, but anytime I can get a guy of this caliber at low 7s prices, I'm going to continue to do it. So we get another week of Taysom Hill, and I don't think that's bad news here for Michael Thomas. These guys have shown an excellent rapport. We've had some great games together. Didn't need to do much in that Denver game, but both games against Atlanta, very productive here. And we think about Philly, and I know Darius Slay, you guys love to tell me how good he is. Well, I'm going to disagree. I don't think he's a shutdown corner, and we've seen him get absolutely dominated by guys like Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. We know Michael Thomas is in that stratosphere of wide receivers. So that secondary is awful. They are good against the run, bad against the pass. I think the Saints find some success through the air here, and I think Michael Thomas continues to get 10-plus targets here at 7,100 on DraftKings and only 7,300 on FanDuel. I think he's one of the best buy low opportunities of the high-end guys here in week 14. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 14. But before we do that, guys, we're going to continue our Beast of the Week contest, absolutely free to play. All you got to do, get in the comment section right below the video, make sure you've hit that thumbs up button, and guess fantasy points for my favorite play of the week. The closest guess will win themselves either a free week of Rotogrinders Premium, going to give you access to everything, not only football, you got NBA right around the corner, PGA Tour Golf, gives you access to all of those sports, everything behind the paywall, absolutely free for a week to check it out. Or if you're already a loyal subscriber, we will send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So without further ado, let's take a look. My favorite play for week 14, you know, Mass, the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. We still owe you a quarterback. We're going to correlate with Michael Thomas. We're going to go with quarterback Taysom Hill of the Saints, this week's Beast of the Week. Now, Taysom been fantastic, and there's been talk of Drew Brees returning. That's not going to happen until at least week 15, so we get another week of Taysom as the starting quarterback. And this guy, like I said, been great, averaging almost 23 DraftKings points per game. We're closing in on a 4x return on those numbers, and this is a guy that we know is going to deliver on the ground, giving us at least 10 carries in every start, giving us at least 40 rushing yards in every start, giving us multiple touchdowns in every single start. And Philly, like I said, they are vulnerable through the air. They are also vulnerable to rushing quarterbacks. We've seen guys have some huge games against them. Lamar Jackson, Daniel Jones twice. But what does Taysom do best? He runs, and the Eagles, second most rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks this season. This team is a mess. I know Jalen Hurts is in there, going to give them a little inspiration. Maybe they'll play a little bit better than they have. But point is, Taysom Hill, too cheap. Initial ownership projections have him under 5%.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toe Tag and Tambo, back for another edition, week 14 of the Sunday Lineup HQ show. Ready to get into it. Got my guy. Haven't got to do a show with him yet. I'm excited for this one. My man, Stevie TPFL. What's going on, Stevie?
Not too much, man. It was really weird. I'm not gonna lie to you, for Devin to count us down and not be ready to like intro a show. It's been a while since I've just gotten to kind of play the second piece to the show, and like I'm excited, man. This slate, a lot of people are like complaining about this slate. I feel like there's so much leverage on this slate. There's so many ways to go for tournaments that I love this slate.
Yeah, I personally like it as well. I think that the bottom line is this, the reason it becomes ugly is because people worry when, there's 13 games, there's a lot of ways you can go. You feel like you're missing spots, or you're, oh, if I don't have that game, I'm dead. Well, that could happen. But what I love about it is on the opposite end of that spectrum, when you've got your conviction and the guys that you're behind, you're set up in a way where sometimes you're just naturally contrarian, or like if you like these guys before, and we'll get to like running back in a second here, where you and I know we both like a guy, and it just turns out while his ownership has creeped up some, it's still right there and it's a great spot. And then we get to compare it against, why are we on that play versus the other side, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually like slates like this. Yeah, definitely will have some spots. You can't play them all. I will preface it a little bit. You said before the show, you're sort of a single entry, 3 max, maybe at most 20 max type of guy. What are you doing this week? What's your plans this week as far as lineups are concerned?
Same thing. Like I don't really switch up like what I do. Like it's been successful for years, and there's no reason to switch it up. Like I'm not an MME guy when it comes to NFL. The only MME sport that I really do is NASCAR. So, mostly 3 entry max. I did run a 20 entry max script this morning just to kind of get an idea of what we'd be looking at on this show. But like I was telling you, like my player pool is usually very condensed, especially when I'm doing like 3 entry max stuff.
Yeah, no, I like that. I'm obviously running MME, definitely a lot of lineups out there. I like this slate for that reason. And, like I said, I can't play every spot. I'm still quite condensed, actually. Just looking at some of my ownerships, like I said, it's awesome to see where you're like, wow, I'm way over on that guy, but you've got a strong conviction behind it, and then you roll it out, and if it ends up happening, you've got a bunch of lineups that are up in the top there now, right? So I love the chat interaction already. I see you in there. I see everybody. Does Stevie live in Alaska? Good one. I'm in the Canadian area, right, where the mountains up in Alberta. It's pretty chilly out here today, so I didn't bust out the toque, if we call it up here. I know they got the beanies down there in the States. I'll bust out my Canadian lingo, but let's talk about some football, man. We'll hop right into it. We've got running back. You just saw a little interaction. Our man Dan Bach and Derek Carty on Twitter go a little back and forth here on this Derrick Henry versus Devontae Adams, and it won't be the first time Devontae Adams' name comes up on this show. But talk to me about just the chalk in general at running back. I've got him out here. I don't know if you can see my screen. If not, it's Derrick Henry, DeAndre Washington, J.D. McKissick, David Montgomery, and then you could throw Eckler into the mix, and we'll save our guy Aaron Jones for after we talk about this chalk at the top here first.
I guess I'll start by saying like I'm fully fading Washington. Like I think he's bad chalk. I feel like he's dealing with a hamstring injury. I'm a Dolphins fan. This could be a really bad like situation for Washington. I don't think he's a good running back anyway. So I don't see why we need him today. I feel like J.D. McKissick is like a much better play. Like even like Giovanni Bernard in that range, I feel like is a better play than like Washington. But yeah, at the top, Derrick Henry's the chalk. He should be. He's facing Jacksonville. This should be a spot that He gets the ball 25 plus times against Jacksonville. And Tyler, like, if he doesn't do well with 25 plus touches, like, it's just not going to happen. Like that, it's just not a good day. Like you just accept what you're looking at. They have a 29.5 point implied team total. So as far as like the chalk goes, like I like Montgomery, I like McKissick, I hate Washington, and I think Derrick Henry's the best running back play on the slate.
Yeah, you said it with Derrick Henry. That's sort of how I feel, exactly the same way. I know everyone's a little bit down on him, but it's just like you said, he's going to get the touches. He's got the matchup. If he doesn't get there, then he doesn't get there. It would not be something new. We've been down this road before with Derrick Henry. It happens. I know he doesn't catch passes, but guess what? The games that he smashes his ceiling, he rarely catches passes in those. It's all about what he does on the ground. Does he get 203 today and bust the slate up? It could happen. This is the spot. This is the matchup. This is the time of year. He just failed everyone last week. The ownership is still sticking with him. We've been down this road before in the past with guys like Will Fuller. I remember last year with, a 50-point game after chasing him for 5 weeks in a row and just keep on betting on that number, and eventually it'll come up, right? So I don't hate your call there. Washington for me, very light as well. I get it. I see it. The matchup is not ideal in my opinion. I know the price is there, but this isn't the days of old where he's 3,000. The minimum price on DraftKings is $4,000. So you're still paying a number there versus some of these other guys. I personally like McKissick more for just $900. You can get into that play. You mentioned that. I like Montgomery. I feels a little chasey. I don't love that, but it's the thing about him is the cupcake matchups has been what he's been crushing, and he does get another one here. So, that one's fine. I like Eckler for tournaments. I think, we'll get into it when we move over to quarterback. I do like Herbert this week. There's Allen, there's Williams, there's Henry. There's a lot of weapons on that side of the ball in what should be a nice bounce back spot after just getting destroyed by the Pats last week. And then obviously the Pats came out flat after that. But let's talk about our guy, man. I'll let you kick it off. I personally like Aaron Jones quite a bit this week. One of my favorite plays here at the running back position. I know that, he's got some late steam, and he maybe even 13 goes up to, let's say, 15, 16, whatever. But I'm not going to shy away for, just a multitude of reasons. But talk to me about Aaron Jones. Give me your take.
Yeah, like even at like 13 to 15, how much of that is with Rodgers and Adams too? So like, when I'm using lineup HQ, I made a group where I don't want Jones and Adams on the same team. So I think that is something that's huge for, when you're building, tournament lineups. And Aaron Jones is, I feel like, the best leverage play on the slate. Everybody wants to play Devontae Adams in the dome against Detroit. But, obviously my take on him has not changed at all this week. But when you're looking at Detroit, they allow the most fantasy points to running backs. This defense is awful. Aaron Jones is easily a guy that can go for 2 or 3 touchdowns. They have a 32 implied team total on the road. Like, Aaron Jones to pivot off of Devontae Adams, to pivot off of Derrick Henry, to pivot off of Austin Eckler. Like, he creates leverage at running back, and he creates leverage off of the chalk, wide receivers. So I love Aaron Jones. I built a bed, and I'm definitely going down if Aaron Jones doesn't have a good game today.
Yeah, I'm sort of the same reasons I'm with you. Well, those are definitely the same reasons, but just to, go on top of it, I guess the idea is like you said, the Devontae Adams, you got him at almost 27%, the highest priced wide receiver at the highest ownership. For me, has just never been a thing that I've been after. I get it. I understand the matchup, the projections, everything will show there, down a couple guys in the secondary, whatever. But it's just the bottom line is Detroit is the worst on the ground. Aaron Jones is very good on the ground. There's so many things. The biggest conversation piece is Aaron Rodgers going to a different era now, talking about him padding his stats for the MVP race. And obviously Devontae would be a big part of that. I mean, there's one way we get extremely burned here, Stevie, and it's when the, end zone fades to Adams don't work. There's passer interference. And then he does pad his stats by sneaking it in himself and scoring 3 rushing touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers and not Aaron Jones. That will be a disaster. But of course you can play Aaron Rodgers and Jones together if you wanted. And gather up all that goal line stuff. But I just think that would be the only way that we completely get buried. I love it. And I like the fact that the ownership is still quite low. Talk to me just in general, I guess, like I said, maybe not making your pool, but Dalvin Cook at 5% ownership, James Robinson, 8%, Kamara, 5%. Like, these are some of the guys snuck in here, and then we'll get down below the 7K range. But any love for these guys, or what's your thoughts on them for large field stuff?
Yeah, I haven't played Kamara since Breeze went down. I don't think that's going to change this week. I do like Dalvin Cook. Like, I think I have 20% in the 20 entry max. So, kind of quadrupling the field on him. Like, he's Dalvin Cook. The touches are going to be there. I know he's expensive, but like, this is another dude that can score 2 or 3 touchdowns and break a slate. So, to create some like leverage off of Henry. I think Dalvin Cook is interesting in that aspect of things too. James Robinson, it's the same thing. Like, this guy is going to get a ton of touches. He's in that same range as like Austin Eckler, who we're going to talk about as like gaining steam like throughout the week. This guy I think he started at like 8 or 9% ownership, and he's almost doubled that. So a lot of people on Austin Eckler. I get it. It's a matchup against Atlanta. I think this offense is going to roll today. So the guy that I really like in this range that I feel like he should be a lot higher owned is Chris Carson. Like, this is a team that is a massive home favorite. Pete Carroll is trying to pound the rock, and I know Carlos Hyde is there and all that stuff, but it's hard not to like Chris Carson in this spot.
Yeah, the let Russ cook motion or movement has seemed to just turn down a little bit, and so people aren't really talking about that as much. But with Carson there, you've got 6,900. You could pay that. I guess the chat wants to talk about it. I like the Carson call. I think for large field tournaments, he's a guy that could score a couple touchdowns, get the 100-yard bonus. He's only 10%. I certainly like that. Just of note, just popped up. Dean, our man, posted this in the chat. I wanted to pull it real quick. Leonard Fournette is inactive today for the Buccaneers. So Leonard Fournette's out. We were about to get to Rojo. That's why I kind of wanted to see what that was and just go with it. We're getting down to this range now here. Ronald Jones is the guy for me. I think at 6.1K, you could get in and, it's the opposite side of that Dalvin Cook game. But if you wanted to go with the pass game there, I think he still works. We've talked about this on the show in the past quite a bit, where you get a spot, a guy like Jones, the Chubbs of the world, the Hunts, all those types, even Derrick Henry, while they don't, the Hunt catches passes, but the other three, the spot is, the idea is if they start early, score a touchdown quick, that keeps the pace of the game up, and then you've got that passing game coming back. So I like some Minnesota stacks with a guy like Ronald Jones in there. He's sitting at 2.9%. I'm sure with that news that just came out, that's going to go up. But anybody else here? I guess the other guy the chat wanted to talk about was Zeke Elliott. Do you have any thoughts on him? Dallas D is projecting to be quite popular, and you could pair it with Zeke. You don't have to run that correlation. I just thought that might be an interesting one. And then just in general as a play, because he was sort of questionable all week, and now it looks like he's good to roll out there.
Yeah, like the news for Rojo. I had some of him already. I might bump that up a little bit. Maybe bump down some Mike Davis in that range to get some more Rojo. As far as like Zeke goes, it's a great spot. Cincinnati defense, not the best. Listen, it's so hard to trust anything Dallas right now. I know a lot of people want to trust Dallas. I don't mind pairing Zeke with the Dallas defense. I don't mind, taking some shots with like CeeDee Lamb and Boyd. I have some combos in that, but it's a great spot for Zeke, assuming that he is 100% healthy and like he's going to be good to go. He should be okay. The only other guy that I really like today is Jonathan Taylor. I saw like he has some good projections in some of the projection models that I like to look at. And this is a great spot against the Raiders. And I feel like with the Rojo news that we could potentially see like Jonathan Taylor even come under like 5%. So really like Jonathan Taylor in this spot against the Raiders. I think that game is like a sneaky shootout game.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I like the call, especially I was going to talk about Taylor. We'll get down. There's a couple more guys, but I like that. A couple more news pieces popped in. Obviously, inactives are coming out as we speak, so we'll roll through them as we see them. Producer Devin keeps that rolling in the chat for us. Dean's chiming in. Appreciate you, Dean. And then, if you guys don't have also lineup HQ yet, I know Devin's going to throw this into the chat, but all that stuff we're setting up with the groups and the back and forth, like if you wanted to put Robinson and Derrick Henry, who I'll make another point on in a second, if you wanted to separate them in a group because they're in the same game and you just don't see them hitting both their ceilings in a large field stuff, you can do that. We showed you with Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams how to use that setting. But a couple more news pieces. So Darrington Evans inactive. I know it's not like he was going to play a bunch anyway, but just to have another guy out of the way behind Derrick Henry, I think that adds to the piece. I think that's the good one. And a couple more things. Kenyon Drake, Hopkins active as expected. Andy Isabella inactive. And then you go down, Brandon Cooks inactive. It came out this morning that he was doubtful, would have to see a major change or a significant change. Now it's official. He's inactive. So definitely if you've got him there. And then, yes, someone just brought up in the chat, and I thought I would chime back in on where you were going with Zeke there. It all makes too much sense, right? This is when we're about to go to quarterback here shortly. It's an Andy Dalton revenge game. I don't know how much revenge he can enact, but this is, Andy Dalton we're talking about here still. But if it was to be the case, you could definitely see lineups where you get Zeke Elliott in and ruin that, take out the Andy Dalton revenge game, and plug in Jones and ruin the Aaron Rodgers MVP run, and you've got yourself Zeke, and you've got yourself our guy Aaron Jones in the lineup together. That's two pretty good backs, man. If we're talking any regular week, we like those two backs. So the fact that both of those guys are coming in at low ownership, that's two pretty big names for a pretty cheap cost that could definitely score some touchdowns out here and get some yards on the ground. So like that, DeAndre Swift stood out for me a little bit there. You mentioned Mike Davis quick. What obviously the CMC being out and whatnot. You like this matchup for him?
I did. I just I like the volume. I might end up with like I said, more Rojo now. Like I had like 15% Mike Davis. I might just swap all that over to Rojo. I think that like Curtis Samuel is another guy that you could just kind of play instead of Mike Davis. So I don't think Mike Davis is going to be high enough owned to really like crush me. Again, like I play a lot of single entry and 3-entry max stuff. So I don't think Mike Davis is someone that is going to crush me now. I think Rojo is a guy that can score 2 touchdowns, so I like him more.
Yeah, I like it. And my guy Chief just mentioned out there, he was mentioned Samuel as you were talking about Davis, and I was sort of going that way as well. I really do like Samuel this week, so it's tough for me to get a lot of Mike Davis. They kind of use him in that role, right? They like to mix him in and around. He could get rush carries, like anything like that around if they get up there, end arounds, things like that, little trick plays. So don't hate it. We talked about Rojo. We'll just quickly go through here. I mean, there's some flop lag candidates, right? CEH burned everybody in Showdown last week as he stood there active on the sidelines doing absolutely nothing. He's got to be healthy, right? He was good to go there. He just didn't put him in the game and got some extra rest. So 5.9K. I think he's a nice little tournament play. You mentioned Taylor, who I like quite a bit. Going down, anybody else down here that you want to talk about? I mean, we mentioned McKissick already, but there's not a lot of other guys that stand out. You kind of got to, go down to Washington or McKissick or else go up from there. That's sort of where I'm at.
I think Giovanni Bernard is super interesting. I think a lot of people are playing that Dallas defense, and that will, like, people don't like to play the defense and the running backs, and like Giovanni Bernard's just in line for a position to get a lot of touches in this game against Dallas. This game's projected to be the fastest paced game on the slate. So even with only a 20 implied team total, I think Giovanni Bernard is a guy that could get 4 or 5 catches, get some rushes, and really all he needs to do is find pay dirt to kind of pay off this price tag. And he's an interesting pivot off of like JD McKissick at the same price range at 4 times the ownership.
Yeah, 1/4 of the ownership at 5K versus 4.9. I definitely don't hate that. Mixon's been out for a while now. Haven't seen the guys behind him, P. Ryan and Pope, really get much run, or they haven't been healthy or whatnot. So I actually do like that. And like you said, it's another way to sort of double, you're double leveraging because you're going off of a play that's, 4 times the amount of ownership. And then at the same time, you're going against the most popular defense or one of them. If not, we won't have, the exact ownership, but it looks like, I think if you flip over to defense, I think Dallas was up there as the, Seahawks, I should say. I forgot 3K Seahawks, but Dallas right there for the cheapie as the most popular. So I think that's it for running back, man. Guys, keep throwing in questions in the chat. We are going to get to them as we go throughout. We'll flip over to quarterback. You've got the tighter pool over there. We can open it up with that, Stevie, and you can give me sort of where you're at with just your overall grand scheme of things at the quarterback position. And then it typically ties in with stacks and how we're building out our lineups anyway. So feel free to run through it that way when you're going through it.
Yeah, so like for me at quarterback, when I'm doing lineup HQ, I don't even set percentages on quarterbacks because I just go in and I set like the quarterback stacks that I want to run. So my highest on quarterback today is Herbert. I really like that stack. So like he's the guy that I'm playing the most today. The second guy that I have the most of is, God, it makes me want to puke, but Tom Brady. I could see so many ways that Tom Brady gets there in this game against Minnesota. This game means a lot for both of these teams. I think it's going to be a close, high-scoring game. And then it's hard not to like Patrick Mahomes against my Dolphins. I feel like Gesicki is a super interesting like run back option with the running back situation and easy passes. So those are really the 3 guys. I think a lot of people are going to be on Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers today. Kirk Cousins is another one that's popping up a lot. So like there's a lot of options. I think it really just comes down to like what type of stacks you're building. And those are the three guys that I'm ending up with the most stacks of today.
Yeah, I love the Herbert call. I think it's a little more one of the more popular ones because 9%, but it's so spaced out. Like this is a week where you've got 11% as the highest, and it's completely broken down from there. So like you said, just get who you want to play. A couple things I like there. You mentioned Herbert. I love that, but I also like the opposite side of that. I look for that. The same game environment.
Yeah.
One of the things people play, if you ever played Superflex, where you can play two quarterbacks, do it in the college stuff. I believe on DraftKings, as well as when you go out, FanDuel used to have it. I don't know if they still do for the Superflex stuff, but one of the biggest correlations in NFL DFS is quarterback versus quarterback. You just can't normally play it. And in Classic Slate, you definitely can't play it. So if I'm thinking that Justin Herbert's going to go off, but then I can go down and get Ryan at 1/3 of the ownership in the same game environment with a situation that actually stacks up quite well because you've got Julio out, so I can fit in Ridley. Hurst is his guy. You've got Gage. You've got a couple options there that you can roll out and then still get those Chargers in on the other side that you like. Eckler, Allen, Henry, whatever you want to do, you can stack it up. I like looking for a situation like that. So I certainly do like Ryan down here. Yeah, the chat's talking a little bit. I like him. Chief is going on. Alex mentioned I go Ryan before Brady, Dalton, and Trubes. I'm with him there. I do like that, but I get the Brady love, and it's not like you're putting yourself into a bad situation here. If you look at it, it's almost the same thing I just described, where Cousins a little bit closer in ownership. He's not quite up there, but we could be low on Cousins. I hear a lot more people talking about these Cousins, Jefferson, Thielen stacks now with Rudolph being inactive, and you've got Irv Smith to play. So there's an option where this could be 7 or 8%. You could almost be in that same situation where Brady ends up being the better play. It's just always so hard to, it's not hard to stack with them. Let Lineup HQ do the work, but hard to feel good about those stacks. And if you got it right, Stevie, because you got all these guys on the other side. Who's your guys today? I mean, you're mixing it up, but you only got, let's say, 20 lineups. Who's your biggest stand as far as the wide receivers to go with Brady?
Oh, it's Godwin. Like, I think Godwin's the guy. Like, I don't have a lot of Evans. I don't have a lot of Gronk. I don't have AB. Like, when you're only playing 20 lineups, you got to take a choice. Like, you have to make a choice. Yeah. Like, if you're playing 150, you can allocate, 30 or 40% to stacking that game as many ways as you want. But when you're playing 20 lineups, you got to take some shots. So I have Godwin for the most part. I think I had 1 or 2 Evans, not a lot. Definitely use groups where I don't want like Godwin and Evans on the same team or AB. So like I put all of the Tampa wide receivers in a group and made it 0 to 1 because I do not want those guys more than once. So Godwin is where I'm taking a stand, and then running it back with, Thielen, Jefferson. And I think I ran it back with one Dalvin Cook team as well.
Yeah, I like that. That's all makes sense to me. Going back just to the now switching it up by salary here, Mahomes, you mentioned it, it's still showing up at 11, but it's such a, strong offense that there's just no way to really get around it. People are always going to have their Mahomes stacks, and rightfully so. It's against the Dolphins. It could be over before the half, but that could also mean Patrick Mahomes has 30 before the half. And the guys that go with them also, when we get to tight end, it's another week where it's pretty obvious, that everyone's paying down for the most part. And, there's only really one pay up that people are considering, and that's Kelsey. But again, not enough ownership, kind of like Waller last week, who's also in the chat, Chief had mentioned last week, who absolutely went off. And now he says he's in on Kelsey. So we'll get there. A couple other guys to talk about. Russell Wilson, I think, is a little bit intriguing. Again, the Carson call I like better. But if you've got enough movement to switch it up, the thing for me is I just like that spot. I like this Seattle offense. So I am going to have it from both ways. I'll have some Carson lineups. I'll stack Carson with Seattle. You often see it, as I showed you guys, the Seattle Seahawks defense running at 18% projected ownership, which is, disgustingly high. Typically the most highest owned defense is not something I want to get after, but probably rightfully so this week. You look at the matchup, they're not really priced up enough when you think about it. 3,000 is pretty cheap for them. And another way just to get around that ownership is then to plug in a guy like Carson, who not only correlates well with them, but doesn't really have a lot of ownership that goes with it, with that. So you're kind of slimming down your overall ownership and still making sense of the build and needing to get less things right to, in turn, hopefully get to the top of one of these GPPs. So don't hate that, but I do like the fact, like, we've been picking on this Jets secondary for weeks now, and it's been working. And now everyone just feels like the let Russ cook movement is dead, but you've got Russ, Metcalf, and Lockett all projected for pretty low ownership and as an overall stack. So is there any love there, or could you see getting there with that in large field?
So the thing that's really interesting about Russ is everybody's going to like pair that stack with like Perryman. And I really hope like this Crowder thing is real and like he's out. It sounds like it's trending to that because like this Berrios guy, like when Crowder hasn't played, has been like the main slot guy. And we know what Sam Darnold likes to do. Like he loves this little short, like crossing routes and like hitting the slot. So like the thing that I love about Russ is you can play him with Metcalf, you can play him with Lockett, but you could be super different on the Jets side and run it back with like Berrios, assuming that Crowder doesn't play. And if Crowder does play and he's 100%, he's good to go. Like there's different ways because everybody wants to play Wilson with a pass catcher and the cheap Perryman, and you could be different running it with like Berrios or Crowder, just, you know, depending on like if he plays. So that's what I like about Wilson. And like if you want to get off of Wilson, like you talked about, you could play Carson. So there's no reason not to have interest in Seattle in this game. They have a 31 implied team total. The weather looks a lot better than it did. I feel like this total is going to keep climbing until that game locks because the weather is looking better.
Yeah, I'll go on a mini tangent right quick on that same note because it ties in with some of the chats asking in just that game. One, you do not need to run it back with a jet. They're terrible. So just because everyone says run it back, I've seen plenty of very sharp tournament players run out stacks against the Jets recently even and just not run it back because you don't have to. The Jets are horrible. Of course, they always have cheap receivers on the other side. But what I'm saying is it's contrary to what the public opinion is. You don't always have to run back a stack. You can just run out the Seattle Seahawks to smash them, and that could very well happen. Secondly, love the call on Berrios. We're going to get there for sure. There's two different spots at wide receiver where I love the fact of it's a real savings. We're talking about $900 between Perryman and Berrios. I definitely like that for that reason. $900 goes a long way on this slate. You can use it for a lot of different options to pay up in positions where you'll need that money. So I definitely love that. The other one is obviously Anderson and Samuel, which we'll save. We'll get there in a minute. That's $1,000. I'm going to find that. I'm going to use that money elsewhere. And I feel like they're in good enough position where, yes, if Anderson smashes Samuel, so be it. But that's part of the reason that goes into it. And then lastly, it was mentioned here, Gallup or Perryman. I think this is a very common comparison we're going to see today because it's $100 apart. I believe Gallup's 3,800, Perryman's 39. What I would say is this, just how I'm treating it. Again, you can do what you like with this information. It's up to you. This is how I like to see it. If my lineup has only one afternoon spot in it, and there's a way that I can, and Gallup just fits there, I don't mind it. I'll go there. I personally like Perryman for the fact that I have more options to switch. I think how many mornings do you play out your DFS morning and everything goes perfect? For me, not very often. So late swap becomes a thing. Late swap is one of the true edges that is left in daily fantasy sports, especially a sport like NFL. So for me, I already like Perryman. I think he's just as good as the play with Gallup. I think both the quarterbacks are terrible that are attached to them. It is what it is. I know it's Andy Dalton Day. We're about to go there in 1 second, by the way, but my thoughts are just that. So if you've got a lineup with multiple positions in the afternoon, if you had just Perryman left, I know you could say, but I could end up going down to Berrios and just leave the money. Sure. But I think they're going to be the two most popular guys in the afternoon. So I don't love it if that's all you've got left in your lineup to save your day. That's not what I like. If you've got multiple spots in the afternoon, though, I like Perryman better personally, just to be honest. But like I said, you don't have to run it back with a jet. Switching back here, Stevie, I'll flip it back over to you here. Andy Dalton getting all the talk. Now there's other guys here. There's Sam Darnold. There's Taysom Hill. There's, let me just flip it back here for a second. Sorry, my bad on that one. You just want to flip it down here. Andy Dalton, Trubisky, sorry. Tua's getting some love now late in the week. And then we already talked about Matt Ryan. My personal opinion is Matt Ryan there. But Andy Dalton, 2.4%. The chat wants to know. People are mentioning it. What are your thoughts here with this Andy Dalton revenge game narrative?
I mean, I don't like, so you take the revenge out. Like, I don't care about all that. What I care about is bad defense, fast-paced game. And like, that's exactly what we're going to see. My thing is he's 5,500. Can he get to like 25? Like, what road does he get to 25? So, I feel like if you're playing Dalton, you almost need to play like a little mini game stack, whether you play Gio, whether you play Boyd, whether you play T. Higgins. Like, you need the game to stay scoring. So like, I think that's like my thing. Like, you look back, the Minnesota game where he put up 20 fantasy points, he threw 3 touchdowns and he barely broke 20. So that's my biggest issue with like Dalton. It's my biggest issue with a lot of these guys in this price range. So I think if you want to play Andy Dalton, you got to really make it like a game stack. I'm with you. I like Matt Ryan more. I think that game goes way over the total. I think that's going to be like a shootout type of game. The Chargers in a bounce back spot. Atlanta, they're just kind of playing better over the last few weeks. The guy that like is in that price range that I don't think anybody's really talking about this week that's super interesting to me is Derek Carr. He's going to throw the ball a million times. We know he has these options with Nelson Aguilar and Waller to kind of run it back. I've already talked about it a couple times. I think this game in a whole is kind of going overlooked. And this is a game that I feel like can go for like 55 to 60 points and that nobody's really talking about.
Yeah, Derek Carr's been on the radar. I guess it's probably, to be honest, Stevie, the sticker shock. I know that it's not much more, but it's like, I always joke about Best Buy pricing. They make the TV, $599 for a reason. That gets you a little bit more interested. The minute it's at 600, you're like, that's not really a good deal. It's a buck apart, right? And you look at Derek Carr at 6,000 straight and it's automatic, and look at 2.1%. I guess it's the other thing too, is the obvious reason, right? Look right above him. I know it still only shows 4%, guys. I just feel like it's going to be slightly more personally, but that's just, my thoughts. I don't think we're too far off there, but Cousins definitely takes up and eats up a bunch of the ownership in this range. Don't hate the car call. Don't hate the game environment. So, I can go there. It could make sense really nicely. Actually, if you plug in your call earlier, you mentioned Jonathan Taylor, you could put him in. And then the idea is the same reason, we're using guys like Derrick Henry to spark these other offenses, or the one I mentioned where you've got them to score the touchdown, and then you get Derek Carr rolling on the passing side. Don't hate that. And then the last, I'm living down in this range, but one of the guys I'm a little bit higher on the most, I think, is Teddy Bridgewater. Another situation where, again, we're about to segue to wide receiver anyway, where you've got Anderson is popular, Samuel is popular. People are talking about Mike Davis, but not really, like 5% on the guy that actually controls all of their life out on the field. So anytime I get a spot like that, I'm not afraid to just get a little bit in there. And I think I've got, 10 or 12%. It's not a lot, but again, I'm spacing it out. I'm really mixing up my quarterbacks because there's a lot of options this week, not playing them all, but, picking and choosing my stances. And Teddy Bridgewater is a definite one. Known Rotogrinders sharp Eric Beimfor. That's his red dot there. I kind of like when he's on a guy that I like and it just lines up. So, Teddy Bridgewater, I think that's a good call at 5%. And then the only, down here, you can take your shots, but, I guess the one guy we got to mention before we move on is Jalen Hurts. Any love for this guy getting his first real start, or whatever you want to call it here, where they're benching Wentz on a bench, Elf on a shelf. Saw those takes this week. We got Jalen Hurts for 5,100. Stevie, what do we do?
Yeah, I feel like I don't think Carson Wentz is that bad. I think this offensive line is awful, and Jalen Hurts can run, and he's more mobile, but the offensive line is still terrible. Like, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. So, that's Miles Sanders. If he had any kind of offensive line, he'd be like a top 5 running back in the league. So, yeah, it's a really tough matchup against this defense. We have so much value at running back and at wide receiver. I don't think I'm not playing Hurts. I don't think I'd recommend playing Hurts either. Could he get there? If he gets there, it's going to be on the ground. So, like, if you're playing Hurts, you're probably playing him naked.
Yeah, I was going to add that. I think you just nailed it. That was the key. If you want to go down there, you can. I don't mind it. It's like you said, play it naked, and then you're looking to really bulk up your lineup elsewhere, right? You're using that to your advantage to stack up these, slate breakers, if you will, within your lineup to try and get there that way, and just hope Hurts has a great day and a great day on the ground. I think it could be a tough day for him. I don't have very much of him, but that's definitely the way that I would roll him out. Nothing else we really need to talk about there. If you guys have more questions at the quarterback position, by all means, throw them in the chat. We will move to wide receiver. We sort of had our piece, Stevie, on Devontae Adams. We went through it quite a bit there, but there's other guys to talk about, man. There's, Tyreek Hill, Curtis Samuels, Robbie Andersons we mentioned, Perryman and the Jets. We kind of just went through, don't need to touch on them heavily, but just talk to me, I guess, first about these few guys at the top, and then we'll get into the plays that we're a little bit more all over ourselves.
Yeah, I love Tyreek Hill. I don't think so I'm a Dolphins fan. I watch every Dolphins game. I don't know if they really have anybody to run with Tyreek Hill. So, I think that he is the guy that's going to break this Miami secondary. I think if you think about the other side of the field, I think Watkins is going to kind of get locked down. I think Kelsey could have a monster game too, but I think Tyreek has, like, he was what, two or three like inches away from like monster game last week too. So like him, Allen, Metcalf, you can always kind of rely on DeAndre Hopkins to get there. Calvin Ridley, like all these guys that are priced under Adams can easily outscore Adams.
Yeah, the Tyreek one is the one like that stands out for me the most. Like you just said it again last week. I was thinking sort of the same thing. We're on a same wavelength here this week, Stevie, and that was what I was thinking. Is it's sort of converted. This is at a much higher level. This is Tyreek Hill. We get it. He's attached to Patrick Mahomes, so let's not forget that right there. He's looking for him. It was last week again after his big 56-pointer the week before. Last week it was right off the hop. It was I can see it every game. They're going to try this because why wouldn't you? Because it seems like it's working like 5 out of 6 times. So why not just start the game off, say go, and then throw that bomb? He's got the arm for it. His arm is at the freshest at the beginning of the game. Hasn't taken any hits yet. Feeling good. This is Mahomes. And now you've got Tyreek Hill down there. His legs we know what they are. He's down there ready to throw up the peace sign as he catches that ball and just outworks them and takes to the house. So I can definitely see that again. I think this is sort of the situation. And look, I see that, he's the second highest owned, but it's a 10% delta between Adams and Tyreek Hill. And this is where I'm talking about. Does Adams get 790 and a touchdown? Probably. But what if Tyreek gets 200 on 5 catches and 2 touchdowns? It's just game over. And of course, you can fit them both. I get it. Play your lineups, build them up, do whatever you're doing. I'm just saying that is definitely possible and something you need to be thinking about while you're building. It's not saying Adams doesn't have a ceiling. Even on the lineup HQ here shows he's actually got a bigger ceiling. It's just how many times does he break that versus, a Hill, a DK Metcalf, even a Tyler Lockett has got a couple games, 40 and 56 points himself. So these are types of guys that you can plug in that could actually outdo an Adams. And then that makes the difference. And again, the Adams lineups may not be set up with some of these running backs that you end up needing because the cost that's involved in spending 9.3K on them. So again, I like the savings for Tyreek Hill there. I'm a Samuel greater than Anderson guy. For me, it's just pick your guy. The ownership's pretty close, 13 and 16, we'll call it. It's $1,000 on a guy that still gets the targets. They like to use him almost as like a mini CMC, Joe Brady out there, setting him up for success and then getting little rush attempts, end arounds, things like that you can actually, not always get. Anderson himself could break a slate, but I'll have my fair share of both. Did you have a take on either side of that one, Stevie?
They're both good plays. They're like you said, like Anderson without DJ Moore is going to open up a little bit more targets, but Curtis Samuel is going to be involved in the running game, the sweep set that they like to run with him, short passes, like wide receiver screens, but really technically like a running back type of screen. So, like he's just so involved that it's hard not to, have some interest in both of these guys. And, if you want leverage, we talked about Mike Davis as a leverage off of those guys, but I think, creating leverage with your boy Bridgewater, like the more I think about it, the more that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's one where I love that, right? Because like I said, it's like the Seattle D. You're adding a piece to something that everyone loves. They see it getting there. That's why they're on it, but they're not going the next level or the extra step of how would that actually happen? Like Teddy B at 5% or possibly less, if some of that goes to Kirk Cousins, as we suspect, then how are his other pieces 20% and get there, but he doesn't? It's very tough for that to happen in most cases, right? So I like that call. You like Keenan Allen, you said. Talk to me a little bit about Keenan Allen here at 7.7K.
I just love the game. Like, so if I love the game, why am I not loving the number 1 wide receiver on this team? 28% target share or something like that. It's really high. It's like a ridiculous amount. So Herbert is coming off of his worst game. I think that this is an excellent bounce back spot for him against Atlanta. They're allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers and quarterbacks this season. So it's hard not to just be like, all right, he bounces back. And Mike Williams is another guy that you have to like. If you're playing like Herbert, you have to allocate enough shares of like Herbert to get Allen and Williams and get the Atlanta runbacks. So that's why I said like this is like my main stack, because like not only can you go Calvin Ridley, you can go Russell Gage. I think Christian Blake is someone that's super interesting today as well. So like this whole game in itself has so many ways to kind of attack it. And, that's one of those reasons that I had to use like so much of my like 20-incher max to kind of get what I wanted from this game.
Yeah, I love this game. So that's why I asked, what your take was on that. My bigger position is definitely on Ridley, but just because if you look at the numbers, the games Ridley has played without Julio have just been phenomenal. And there's that one game, the Island game, where he had 0. Literally, it was an Island game. It was a showdown slate, and he ended up with the 0 as like the 80% owned guy. That can happen, but it doesn't happen very often. Let's be honest here. So I certainly like Ridley. For some reason, his ownership just stayed stagnant. I thought when it was at 8 earlier in the week, Julio was officially announced well early enough that you thought it would just skyrocket up. I thought people loved this game, but as you see with Ryan at 3%, Ridley at 8%, to me, that's a perfect stack. And then, like you said, there's ways to get unique. You could then fit in a chalkier Eckler, who we looked at earlier, or you could go the other way and just get a guy for a little bit more money in Keenan Allen and at a different position, wide receiver, and plug him in. And he's only 10% ownership. And these are all guys that get the ball a lot, should get a lot of targets and target share in general, and just be able to have their opportunities. That's all we can really look for when we're building. So like that, these Minnesota guys, do you have a preference on them? I know Jefferson and Thielen will both be a little bit owned, but I mean, again, it's extremely dispersed here as far as ownership is going here. But Jefferson and Thielen, what's your thoughts on those two?
Make a group where you don't have both of them. I feel like you're gonna have exposure to both of these guys. You should. Like the target share for both of these guys over the last couple games have just been so close that it's hard to have a take. Like, what's your take? Like, there is no take. Like, you want lineup HQ do the work for you. Run back your Tampa stacks with either Thielen or Jefferson. Make a group where you're not playing them both. If you want to hand build a couple teams with both of them with Cousins or both of them with Brady, do it. But for the most part, I feel like it's going to be one or the other, especially with like Irv Smith back and like being a red zone threat. And Dalvin Cook being like a threat to score touchdowns. I don't know if both of them get here, but the Tampa secondary has definitely been really bad here recently. And it's shown. Their run defense is allowing the second fewest fantasy points over the last month, and they're allowing the most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last month.
Yeah, that's what you said. The best line you said was, what's the take? There is no take. I think that's the facts. Like you said, let it build up. If for some reason that $400 works in your favor, or if you just have a lineup where that's how it sets up, then go with it. They're both great plays. Like you said, I just think, again, back to it, I like it with Cousins. I think the way to get unique is what you just said. And that's why I went and set the group right here as we're live, is if you look at it, most people are going to go with both. And I think there is a stronger way of going with Kirk Cousins with one, and then just either picking your guy, if it's Rojo now, because that makes sense based on the Leonard Fournette being an active position there, or if you've got, a spot you like, if you choose, hey, this is Antonio Brown's week, I like him, or you mentioned Godwin, that's your take. You can do it up that way and still fit in a lot of other great plays, and that your stack can still be just fine, not necessarily needing them both. So I like that. I mentioned Lockett, AJ Brown, these are bounce back candidates. Michael Thomas, pretty cheap at 7.1K. Terry McLaurin not getting any love this week, but going down to this sort of low, like the 6K range. Anybody in here you want to talk about from Robinson down to Parker, besides Godwin, who you've already mentioned? Anybody else that stands out?
I think Parker's okay if you're playing the Kansas City side. I think Gesicki and Parker are the only two guys that you can really run it back with Miami today. Right below that range, like I love Marvin Jones. I'm like his ownership, like we were talking about extra survey before we got started, but like Marvin Jones is like a core play for me today. Like, and like it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why does everybody love Green Bay, but Marvin Jones is projected for less than 5%? Like, if your Green Bay guys are going to get there, Detroit's going to have to score points. And who are they going to score points with outside of Jones and Hawkinson? Like, both of these guys, even like Swift, like every one of these guys have really low ownership right now for some weird reason, because everybody loves Green Bay, but they're not playing Detroit. And like Marvin Jones to me is just, he's a core play. I think Corey Davis in this range as well. These two guys are just phenomenal plays to kind of pivot off of Anderson and maybe get more Samuel in your builds.
Yeah, I really like that. Just make a quick note there. Reminder, we obviously get off. We got about 15 minutes left here, Stevie, and we'll go through some of the chat questions. We'll get to tight end here in a minute, but I really like that call. And, I like Jones as it was, but I was just thinking in my head, just everything we've been talking about here on the show. Like you said, it only really happens if what we expect to happen happens, and everyone's on this Green Bay side. But you could actually go to, I wouldn't hate this, is what I made note of, was Stafford, Jones, Hawkinson. the only way they come back. That's like you said, they have to go through those guys. And then you can use our Aaron Jones call on the other side, and it's him. He goes off and does his thing, and that's what forces them to need it back. Or if you want to put Adams in there, again, it's another way to use an extremely chalky position in a guy like, 26% owned Devontae Adams. That's extremely expensive. Fit in some cheap pieces in Stafford, Jones, Hawkinson, still make a stack that makes a lot of sense. And you could definitely see something like that at the top this week. So like that call. I like Robinson and McLaurin as guys in here that can blow up. It'd be remiss if we didn't mention Cooper, Gallup, the Dallas guys to go with that game, that Dallas-Cincinnati. They're obviously good spots to take a stand and get after it. Corey Davis getting a little love this week. I know he had a nice outing there last week. And then, down here, it's going to be the same that we talked about. Samuel, Kute now with Cooks. We didn't mention this, but Brandon Cooks was announced out. I think I did mention earlier, actually, because it was significant chance he was going to be out, and then he ended up being announced out. So any more love down here in this range before we get to sort of the punt plays and move to tight end?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, if you're playing a lot of J.D. McKissick, you can obviously pair it with the Washington defense, or you can take some shots on Brandon Ayuk. They definitely have shown us that they want to get him involved in the offense, and they're going to force him the ball a little bit. So I just want to mention, if you are playing McKissick, you can kind of run it back with Ayuk. You don't have to, but with McKissick being so popular, I think you definitely want to have some exposure to the other side of the game as well. You talked about Coty. I think he's fine. I really like Chad Henson. Super cheap, going up in that same matchup. Tim Patrick, Rashard Perryman, Michael Gallup, a bunch of these guys that we've already kind of talked about in this range. Nelson Aguilar. And I think the last one I kind of mentioned him in passing a few minutes ago. I think Christian Blake is super interesting with Atlanta having nothing to play for. This could be one of those things where we see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and Christian Blake as that 3rd wide receiver. And if he can get open, Matt Ryan gets him the ball a little bit. He's 3K. So I don't mind taking some shots on Christian Blake.
Yeah, I think most people would go to Gage there. So I like that call. It makes perfect sense. And again, opportunity is going to be there. The price is right. Extremely cheap. We like that game environment. That makes sense. And then the last one, we didn't talk a lot about it earlier, but just the Jacksonville, Tennessee spot. There's a lot of guys that you can use. We mentioned quickly there, Corey Davis. I like AJ Brown for that side, but there's LaVisca 4.1. There's some cheaper guys than him on that side. And then also another really high flop lag candidate is Chark. Last week, everyone was on Chark. It didn't come through. 5.3K still in a good matchup at 5% ownership. Think that one is interesting. And then McKissick is mentioned there, but there's another guy I think is interesting if you're playing McKissick, and that's you mentioned Ayuk. I think that one's interesting. But what about Jordan Reed, revenge game himself? We're going to flip over to tight end. I'll use that as the segue. He's not getting as much love as the opposite side of that game. If you look, everyone's on Logan Thomas for $200 cheaper in the same game. You're getting 1/6, 1/7 of the ownership pretty much. You round it up to 14% there. And you can play some Jordan Reed. What's your thoughts on that?
I'll pass. I get why anybody okay. So if you are playing McKissick, sure. Okay. I'm not going to argue with you on that. If you want to run back, super chalky, get it. But revenge in football, it drives me nuts, Tyler. In basketball where somebody can control the ball and control how they play. Okay, we can talk revenge in basketball, but unless we're talking about catchers against pitchers that used to catch a lot and stuff like that, fine. I just can't get on it. If you're playing a cheap tight end today, it's Cole Kmet, man. This is a great spot. His snaps, they don't want to play Jimmy Graham anymore. He's the guy to play. 2.8% ownership is a joke. I ended up, I think 30 or 40% of this guy today.
Yeah, great play. 2.9K. I think, again, it's not it's a huge difference, but I think a lot more people would just think of Akins down here in this range. I definitely dialed up a little new phone who dis on Will Dissly with my Seattle stacks. I won't lie, because I think that secondary can just get destroyed in every which way. And so I've got that. I've heard some Drew Sample takes. There's a lot of guys. I think the biggest thing that stands out, and we'll scroll back to the top, is 18%. we live the dad life, Stevie, with reading the Three Little Bears and the porridge and whatnot. Is this too hot, too cold, or just right on Travis Kelce at 18% as far as his projected ownership? Because I don't know, man. Like, it's a spot where it's Mahomes. We just talked about it with Tyreek, and we talked about that whole offense. It's your Dolphins. You mentioned that. This looks like another week where we could just see the pay up, pay off. So what's your thoughts on Travis Kelce at 7.4K, 18% ownership?
Probably not high for either one, like the price or the ownership. Like you talked about it, man. Like, how do we ever doubt the Chiefs? How do we ever doubt playing like any of these guys? Like, if you're not paying up for Waller or Kelce, you're probably going down below like 5K. Like you talked about, like Disley, like Kelce and Waller are just so far above every other tight end. Both of these guys can put up 30, which pays off that price tag without question, at a position that, like, it's really rare to see guys get over 20. These guys can go for 30. So I don't ever think that Kelce is high enough owned. And like 7.4K, it's like, Tyler, we go to look at wide receivers in that range. Like, would you play him over like AJ Brown? Would you play him over like Justin Jefferson? Like, he could easily outscore those types of guys.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me, and that's where, I was kind of getting at with it, I think it's too low. 18% looks like it's the most at the position. So naturally people say, oh, that's a lot. He's the highest owned. He's not even 20%, and he's the guy that can absolutely destroy it. It's a onesie position, right? If you want to put a tight end in the flex, you can. I don't recommend it. None of the sample size of looking at Millie Maker winners, et cetera, show that working out too often. But I guess the point is that you could definitely still play. That's kind of the gist of it. You can get in to your Jefferson lineups. You can get AJ Brown, Tannehill, and Corey Davis in a stack and still easily fit Kelce. The right now for me, with the amount, there's at least one value wide receiver. There's so many options we gave you, but if you just put one of those in your lineup and then look at how many value running backs there are that are out there, as well as, not to mention, great running backs that we talked about in that mid-range, right? You don't need to play the guys at the top. You just start at Aaron Jones and go down. Robinson, we mentioned Carson, Elliott, go down, Mike Davis, all these guys that we mentioned here, Rojo now. There's a lot of room to fit Kelce. So maybe he goes up a little bit after we get off this show, and people are noticing this with some of the values that are popping up and some of these late inactives. But I think at 18%, it's not quite enough. So I certainly do like that. You mentioned a couple of the others, the Hawkinson, you sort of drop down there. Henry's nice. Ingram, these guys you can play. Fant, if you want to get involved in that Carolina game, I guess I should talk about it because I do like this. So, when I talked about it earlier with using Bridgewater with those two popular wide receivers in Carolina. Again, I like going different at the onesie position. So I like getting different here with Fant when he's 3% owned. There's lots of guys that only have 3% ownership. I'm just using it to correlate. I know our guy Donnie in the chat mentioned, look, I'm only using some Drew Sample. It's disgusting, but it correlates with the Dallas-Cincinnati game. So I get it. That's how I'm saying to use it as well. I'm not really using these guys as one-offs or anything too much. A guy like Fant, though, I think has enough of a ceiling possible. I know he's attached to Drew Lock, but I think it is possible that he could get there in a good matchup against Carolina. And I also don't hate that you've got Fant and Samuel both for much, they're still under 10K combined. And I like talking on here normally about these secondary stacks, Stevie. And that's when I think that you could definitely get after and get different that way. Again, you're using a popular Curtis Samuel, but not how many people are pairing him with Noah Fant, and they correlate. They make sense together. If one goes off, the other should get targets. So anybody else you want to talk about at tight end, or else we got about 5 minutes or so for questions, guys. You want to start chucking them in now, rapid fire, go ahead. But lead us out here at tight end. We might even do some defense, Stevie. We never do, but we might.
I like Gesicki a lot, man. With the situation with the running backs in Miami, I think Gesicki's in line for like 8 to 12 targets in this game. I think Miami's going to trail. I don't think it's a secret at any point. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to score on the Miami terrible defense. The secondary anyway. Like, I just think this is a great spot for Gesicki to have a big game. And like, I hate that he had a big game last week because it feels kind of chasey. It's like David Montgomery, but they're in good spots again. So like, even though it feels a little chasey, I think we kind of have to approach this as Miami's going to get down. The running back situation stinks. Tua is going to hit short, easy passes to Mike Gesicki today.
I like that. I think last week was, I don't think it's too chasey though, Stevie. And the reason I'll tell you this is why is because I think last week was an eye opener for the team themselves and for us out here watching it, because everyone had Gesicki's name attached to Fitzpatrick and there was no way he could do it any other way. And now you sort of see, like you said, and then you got this running back situation now where obviously Washington looks like a good play, but if you think Kansas City's going to stomp them, how involved is he actually going to be? And versus a guy like Gesicki's going to be out there every play, going to have to get targets, can definitely rack him up, and has no ownership attached. So questions starting at the tight end. Our guy, Donnie Watson, any Eifert paired with Henry? Not in love with it, but I've got game stacks there. So I actually would use it more in that. It's not really a high secondary correlation on my list, but it absolutely could work. Right? It makes perfect sense. Henry does the damage we expect. Darrington Evans out as just another piece to say, like, look, we already knew it was going to be him, but I think he does a lot more with his workload this week than what we saw last week. So I like it regardless of ownership. And then yes, Tyler Eifert would work. What was the other play though down there? I thought of, there was somebody else I was going to mention. You mentioned Kmet, who I really liked. We got a couple minutes here, Stevie. Let's just talk defense real quick. And the questions are starting to load up. So just people do like to round it out with a little defense every now and again. So what are your thoughts here? We've got Seattle, 18%, Dallas, 12, the Titans. I'm assuming people are just putting that with, obviously it's Glennon, but they're putting it with Henry as well. So any thoughts on these top three and then any that stand out to you?
Listen, defense is whatever fits in at the end of the day for me. So I'll probably be underweight on the Seahawks just because of their ownership. I think that you could play the Titans, you can play Carolina, you can play the football team, Arizona. Like, there's so many options. You could play the 49ers. So I don't have to play a chalky defense. Everybody's playing the Cowboys defense. All right, I'll take a shot on the Bengals defense. Like, if you have the money, you're playing the Saints defense against Philly. Like, they're gonna sack Hurts 5+ times today. So like, if you have the extra cap when you're done building, throw in the Saints defense, man. I think like it's shocking to me like how low owned the Saints defense are going to be against a rookie quarterback making his first start with a terrible offensive line with a great defensive line. So I like the Saints if you're going to pay up, but there's so many options in that 3K to like 2.3 to 3K options. So it's hard to like click the Saints, but it also, you understand why you want to click the Saints.
Yeah, I just looked at mine. I've got 20% Saints. And again, you've got money to spend. The biggest thing that stood out for me on the Saints this week was we all paid $4,400 for Miami last week, but now nobody wants to pay $3,800 for the Saints. That just doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to go there. It's everything you just said. The Miles Sanders comment you brought up earlier to me stood out. I love Miles Sanders, would definitely be a top 5, top 10 easy back in the league if he just had himself a line, and they don't. And now they've got Hurts back there. So I'm all aboard with the Saints. Love that call. A couple other defenses that could stand out there. You mentioned some of them, but the Panthers, I saw somebody mention, I think that could. Atlanta, we just saw the Patriots just destroy the Chargers, but Bill Belichick versus rookie quarterbacks is typically a thing. So that could be the reason, but Bears, there's down here, there's the Packers tying in with our Jones correlation, if you don't like the other side of that. And then real quick, just to round out tight end, and we'll go through rapid fire here, but someone said any Logan Thomas love. I think we talked enough about tight end, but the idea is we know he's owned for a reason, but his ownership is just so much that the ceiling, it's tough to see. Like 15 points, could it happen again? Sure. It's what we've seen of him lately, but I just don't know if that's going to be a big deal. I like him in cash, right? I like Logan Thomas in cash. I think it makes a lot of sense, or a high dollar, smaller field where you're just trying to get the floor and the ceiling out of it. You don't want to take on too much risk at that position. By all means, for me. Any other Logan Thomas thoughts there, Stevie?
I X'd him out. Like, Cole Kmet is just such a better play for me, in my opinion. Yeah. So
yeah, and tournaments and stuff, it makes sense, man. Like, exactly.
Like, even in cash games, I'm playing Kmet over Logan Thomas. Call me crazy, I don't care. Like, I think Kmet, like, there's no reason not to have an interest in Kmet going up against that Houston terrible defense, and the targets and the snaps are way up for Kmet and they're way down for Jimmy Graham.
Yeah. The matchups, the game flows, the quarterbacks attached, in Mullins and Trubisky. Like, there's not, it's Aaron Trubisky and Smith. There's just not enough to worry about there. So to me, it doesn't matter. Like you said, I'm just looking, like you said, even in cash, it will be fine. Kmet 2%. It's just crazy at that low of an ownership. So hitting up the questions. I know you can see them too there. Any that stand out to you, Stevie, that you want to get after?
we could potentially rank Patrick, Henson, and Perryman. I think that's super close. Like if you're looking at like ownership wise, I think Henson is the lower owned. So maybe Henson, then Perryman, then Patrick. But I could see any of those three guys like scoring a touchdown and outscoring the other guy.
Yeah, Patrick's probably got to be last just because, again, attached to Drew Lock that game. The other two, the ownership's much less on Henson, so I definitely could go there. Eagles D, the opposite D's, we'll end on this, I guess. You mentioned the opposite of Dallas is Cincinnati. Why couldn't you just go there? I agree. I've seen that plenty of times work, so I like that. And on the same token, could you use the Philly D? I think so, but it would just be, again, large field stuff. If that's all the money you got left over, just again, like Stevie said at the top, use whoever you want at defense with whatever's left if you love the rest of the lineup and it makes sense. Don't go out of your way, but if that's how it ends, definitely go with it. Fun show, Stevie. Love doing this with you, man. This was awesome. Appreciate all you guys in the chat. There's another show coming up, so keep your questions for that. Thank you for all the support. You guys can find me on Twitter at Totag and Tambo. Other than that, thank you and good luck.
Week 14 is here, and I'm back with 6 of my favorite plays, including a couple workhorse running backs. I'm going to be jamming in my lineups. What value tight end am I looking at this week? And my favorite quarterback receiver pairing for week 14. Who is it? Belly up to the fantasy bar and find out. Welcome back, loyal bar patrons. Week 14 is here, and I'm here with 6 of my favorite plays covering both FanDuel and DraftKings. Thank you, as always, for stopping by the fantasy bar. Now, guys, as always, before we get started this week, do me a favor. Click that thumbs up button on YouTube. That is our tip jar. The video absolutely free. That's all we ask of you is hit that thumbs up button and make sure you subscribe to the channel and get notified when the videos are coming out. Now, before we look at week 14, let's take a quick look back at week 13. Some good, some bad. Obviously, a big miss with Austin Eckler. That game got away from the Chargers very quickly, and even in garbage time, he wasn't able to put up numbers. And Evan Ingram, also a disappointment. Kind of mad with our Chicago stack of Trubisky and Robinson. The touchdowns went via the running backs, but a big hit on our value skinny stack there with Jonathan Taylor and Kiki Cutie. Now, let's move on to week 14 here. Looks like a fun slate, big slate of games here. No more buys on the docket, so let's jump in at the running back position. We're going to go right back to Chicago here with David Montgomery. Now, liked him last week. We mentioned him on the show. We liked the passing game there, but Montgomery was in a good spot, and guess what? He's in a good spot here once again this week. And the thing that really stood out to me, the pricing here on David Montgomery. We're talking about a guy that gets almost 100% of the work. I know Cordero Patterson works in and gets some of that work there for Chicago, but we're talking about a true workhorse running back here, and we are paying middling prices here in the mid-sixes to get that. So I'm going to be all over that here once again with David Montgomery. Another thing that stood out, ownership. Early ownership projections, not nearly as high as I thought they'd be here in this matchup for a guy playing as well as he has. We're talking about a guy averaging almost 28 DraftKings points per game over these last two matchups against Green Bay and Detroit. Well, guess what? It's another juicy matchup here with Houston, allowing the second most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So once again, a fan of this Bears offense. I don't hate Trubisky. We're not going to go back there here again in the six-pack this week, but I do love the spot for David Montgomery against the Houston Texans. All right, let's go to the wide receiver position. A guy I think's been a lot better than you realize, and that's Brandon Ayuk of the Niners. Now, we know that Niners offense, they're without their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. They're without their huge weapon in George Kittle. Deebo Samuel, a little bit banged up here. I'm expecting him to play. But the point is, Brandon Ayuk playing some great football. Kind of took a little while to get acclimated, dealt with some COVID issues. But over his last 4 games played, 40 targets in that span And a lot of those games with Nick Mullins, a guy that we know is going to put the ball in the air and make things happen. So Ayuk finding the end zone as well, touchdowns in 3 straight games. But this guy has been a model of consistency. If you're looking for a guy in cash games, the target should be enough for you. If not, how about the 21 DraftKings points per game he has put up over the last 4? Consistency is there. Touchdowns have been there. And I think we get a ceiling game here as well. Brandon Ayuk, add it all up. Great price here on DraftKings. It'll be a big part of my builds here in week 14. All right, let's stay in that mid-range. Let's save you some more money at tight end. Mike Gesicki of the Dolphins. So a big matchup here for Miami. I'm really looking forward to this game against Kansas City. And we know Miami at their heart wants to run the ball. They want to play some defense. Obviously want to keep Patrick Mahomes and company on the sidelines. The problem is I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. Kansas City projected for 4 touchdowns in this game, so it may force Miami to throw a little bit more than they want to, and that'll be good news here for Gesicki. We know Devontae Parker, the alpha there, but Gesicki's really become the 1B to Parker's 1A. Season high in both targets and receptions last week. Looked great, gets a lot of red zone targets, second on the team in red zone targets this season. And the Chiefs, this is a position they have struggled with. They've been pretty good against wide receivers. So, you know, Parker going to get a lot of that defensive attention. You know, Gaskin going to be a focus as well. I think that's going to mean good things and good opportunities here for Mike Gesicki. Second most fantasy points allowed over the last month here by Kansas City to the tight end position. Prices are fair here. Upside is huge. Love Mike Gesicki in the spot against Kansas City. All right, back to the running back position. Promised you 2 workhorses. We gave you Montgomery. We're going to go to my boy in Jacksonville, James Robinson. Now, you guys know I love me some J-Rob here. A guy that just gives you a great floor. In fact, 10 or more DraftKings points in every single game this season. So really giving you that floor you're looking for. And we know the ceiling is there as well. Guy that's put up many games in the 20s, and he's also gotten some games into the 30s. And I think this is a spot he could attack that 30 DraftKings point threshold. We look back all the way back to week 2 when barely any of us knew who the hell James Robinson was. 6.4 yards per carry against this Tennessee defense, and they have not done anything to make that defense better. In fact, I think it's gotten worse as we've gone along, and we just look at the last 4 weeks, giving up over 31 points per game here are the Titans. So I know this Jacksonville offense, not the most explosive offense out there, but the playmakers at wide receiver should help. DJ Chark back in that lineup should help, and this defense is that bad. James Robinson should be in a good spot here once again against this Titans defense. Moving on, pick number 5 here in week 14 of the 6-pack. We're going to go to the wide receiver position with Michael Thomas of the Saints. So pricing really stood out here. We're continuing to buy low on these Saints. Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, we saw bounce back a little bit last week, but anytime I can get a guy of this caliber at low 7s prices, I'm going to continue to do it. So we get another week of Taysom Hill, and I don't think that's bad news here for Michael Thomas. These guys have shown an excellent rapport, have had some great games together. Didn't need to do much in that Denver game, but both games against Atlanta, very productive here. And we think about Philly, and I know Darius Slay, you guys love to tell me how good he is. Well, I'm going to disagree. I don't think he's a shutdown corner, and we've seen him get absolutely dominated by guys like Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. We know Michael Thomas is in that stratosphere of wide receivers. So that secondary is awful. They are good against the run, bad against the pass. I think the Saints find some success through the air here, and I think Michael Thomas continues to get 10-plus targets here at 7,100 on DraftKings and only 7,300 on FanDuel. I think he's one of the best buy low opportunities of the high-end guys here in week 14. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 14. But before we do that, guys, we're going to continue our Beast of the Week contest, absolutely free to play. All you got to do, get in the comment section right below the video. Make sure you've hit that thumbs up button and guess fantasy points for my favorite play of the week. The closest guess will win themselves either a free week of Rotogrinders Premium, going to give you access to everything, not only football, you got NBA right around the corner, PGA Tour Golf, gives you access to all of those sports, everything behind the paywall, absolutely free for a week to check it out. Or if you're already a loyal subscriber, we will send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So without further ado, let's take a look. My favorite play for week 14, you know, Matt's the Beast of the Week. All right, Beast time. We still owe you a quarterback. We're going to correlate with Michael Thomas. We're going to go with quarterback Taysom Hill of the Saints, this week's Beast of the Week. Now, Taysom been fantastic, and there's been talk of Drew Brees returning. That's not going to happen until at least week 15, so we get another week of Taysom as the starting quarterback. And this guy, like I said, been great, averaging almost 23 DraftKings points per game. We're closing in on a 4x return on those numbers. And this is a guy that we know is going to deliver on the ground, giving us at least 10 carries in every start, giving us at least 40 rushing yards in every start, giving us multiple touchdowns in every single start. And Philly, like I said, they are vulnerable through the air. They are also vulnerable to rushing quarterbacks. We've seen guys have some huge games against them. Lamar Jackson, Daniel Jones twice. But what does Taysom do best? He runs, and the Eagles, second most rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks this season. This team is a mess. I know Jalen Hurts is in there, going to give them a little inspiration. Maybe they'll play a little bit better than they have. But point is, Taysom Hill, too cheap. Initial ownership projections have him under 5%. So anytime I can get a guy like that at that kind of ownership in this kind of matchup at these prices, sign me up any day of the week, making Taysom Hill easily my favorite play for week 14 and this week's Beast of the Week. All right, guys, that wraps up for week 14. As always, any comments, questions, feedback, that comment section is there for you. Also can reach out and follow me on Twitter at BeerMakersFan. And if you'd like more expanded thoughts on the slate from my boys Head Chopper, Notorious, and myself, make sure you get over to Rotogrinders and check out the DFS OGs podcast. We talk every single game, our favorite plays, our favorite stacks, our favorite bets, a little bit of nonsense as well. If you haven't checked it out, go give it a listen. For Rotogrinders.com, I am Beer saying salut. Best of luck here in week 14, guys. Back next week. We'll see you.
Hey, thanks for checking out our videos. If you want more expert advice on DraftKings, FanDuel, or any other daily fantasy sports, make sure you check out the current videos playlist.
Week 14 is here, and I'm back with 6 of my favorite plays, including a...
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Crunch Time NFL edition. We're going to talk some sports. We're going to talk some football. We're going to talk some key plays for both DK and FanDuel. But first, I do believe, we got to give a little shout out to one Christy Metzger and Mr. Tuttle. Christy, how are you?
I'm doing great. Another good Sunday, big slate today. Lots going on. So excited to hang out with you guys again today.
Excellent. Always a good time. And really, there's been a lot of positive feedback in the YouTube chat and in the Discord chat. So appreciate that. Apparently, the people like it. Tuttle, we got you joining as well. How are you?
Doing all right. A little bit of hectic of a morning. Hopefully, we can keep the positive chat going. Hopefully, we don't screw that up and can provide some good analysis.
Yeah. All right. Well, then why don't we start with your PrizePicks promo, which I'm sure you already sent to Devin.
I did not because I'm a terrible employee.
I know.
But Christy definitely did.
Yeah, throwing you under the bus. Yes. Christy, let's start with before we do this, by the way, I was just reading the details of this PrizePicks promo that we have going on. You sign up with the promo code Rotogrinders. You get a 100% deposit bonus up to $50. You get 3 free months of RG Premium, and we're giving you the picks. Like, you just listen to Christy. It's too good. All of these things are coming together. It's like a DFS guy that you can't fade. That's what this promo feels like. Christy, what do you have for us today?
Exactly. Well, one of my favorite picks today is Justin Jefferson. I've got the over on him for 78.5 receiving yards. I think he's just a phenomenal play today. Tyreek Hill blew up in the same matchup recently. So one of my favorite plays. And I didn't get the other one in, but I also, high on Kiki Kute. I think he had, when I looked at it, he had like 11 and a half or so fantasy points, and I have the over on that too. So a couple plays that I like.
Excellent. Good stuff. One more thing I will add before we dig into this slate is that you should join for Rotogrinders Core 4. Right now is the perfect time to do so. Not only do you get all the football content that we provide here and behind the scenes, lineup HQ, all this goodness, but basketball is starting up, and that is included. You get both sports, it keeps rolling into baseball and all that. So now is truly the perfect time to sign up. We got a new discount going on for your first month of the subscription as well. So go ahead, sign up. Best deal in the biz, and the best subscription, the best experts in the biz. So let's let them do their thing. Christy, will you want to start talking about maybe some of the more breaking news that has happened today?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few things going on. We were waiting to get news on Zeke. He is playing today. Brandon Cooks is out, so upgrade for the other receivers in that offense, Kiki Kute and Hansen. Let's see. And then Ronald Jones. Fournette was a late scratch, so that really bumps him up, and we'll get into that when we talk about the running backs. Those are a few of the ones that happened here lately.
Okay, excellent. Well, then I think we roll right on into this slate. We like to start a quarterback. Tuttle, I will hand it off to you, and you can throw it downfield. Who do you got?
Yeah, so quarterback's kind of interesting today because I think I have a little bit different of a stance than most people. I think most people are going to be jamming in Patrick Mahomes as their QB1 on both sides, trying to do what he can in cash games. I actually prefer Russell Wilson over Patrick Mahomes. That's the game, though, that we do, I think, have a little rain. You seem to be all right with it, though, out in Seattle. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me elaborate on that. There's rain around Seattle today, but the timing of the game, I'm looking at radar and high resolution models. I think it rains before the game a decent amount. I think it rains after the game a decent amount. But during the game, maybe a passing shower or two. It just doesn't look like a whole lot of rain. And for that reason, play whoever you want, blender it. I don't have any issues.
There you go. Yeah, so if you're paying up, I have no problem with Mahomes, but I do like Wilson slightly better. Some builds on DraftKings, you can't get to either of those two, in which Aaron Rodgers is going to be, I think, fairly decently owned as a cash game quarterback as well. Completely okay with it. I think that's kind of where I would stop, though, in terms of cash game quarterbacks on DraftKings. FanDuel, again, it's kind of the same trio that I'm trying to target. Wilson, if you can get it, Rodgers. There is some interest, and I'm kind of okay with it, in going down to Tom Brady in certain builds. I don't love it, but he's really cheap on FanDuel, so I could see the reasoning for it. I do think this is a game where Tampa Bay explodes offensively, whether that be through the air or on the ground. I actually slightly prefer exposure to the rushing attack, which we'll get to later. But I have no issues with Brady either as kind of a secondary cash game option. But I think that is basically kind of the focus of cash games. I'll let Christy talk about. There's a lot of good tournament targets, so I'll let Christy talk about those.
Okay, Christy, take it away.
Yeah, completely agree on the cash. For tournaments, a couple guys I find myself on. I really do like that Tampa Bay Minnesota game a lot. So Kirk Cousins is a guy that I'm targeting for tournaments a little bit. I think Watson, he always has upside for tournaments. I know he's missing Cooks again this weekend, but I think he's a great play for tournaments. Matt Ryan, I know he's disappointed, and Julio is missing this week. But he's always he does have upside, although he hasn't shown a lot of it lately. And then Justin Herbert, I think that's a fantastic game matchup this week too. Eckler's projected to be pretty popular. Keenan Allen's been awesome. So I do think Herbert makes some sense on the tournament side too. And then, of course, all of the ones that Tuttle mentioned too are great tournament plays as well.
Mike says, any interest in Stafford and cash on DK?
He's cheap. I mean, he has that going for him. I guess it kind of just depends on the lineup construction. If the lineup construction makes sense, I could probably be talked into it.
Okay. Christy, any interest?
I have one more actually too. Trubisky. I know we used him last week. It did not work out, but kind of the game script. I know David Montgomery took a couple of touchdowns away. So, if you have the guts to do it, I think you can really load up your lineup with him. Montgomery's projected to be popular. Komet is kind of interesting at tight end, but I think he has an interesting GPP play today.
Okay. Before we get to running back here, I do want to take this question from Jared McDowell, which is just a general question. I'll let you both weigh in. With so many good plays, is this a week to just not worry about ownership in large field GPPs and or single stack with maybe one bring back? So is this a week where you care less about ownership is in GPPs? Is that a thing? Is that possible? Tuttle, you can go first.
I think you always take in ownership into consideration. I mean, you might be able to convince me that you do it a little bit less so on certain weeks, but I think you're always trying to look for, leverage plays and things like that, which are a little bit more important with ownership than, maybe like trying to get under ownership under a cumulative number. So yeah, I mean, I'm still taking into account. I don't think ownership's going to be too heavily concentrated this week. Like if we look, Devontae Adams and Derrick Henry are projected to be the highest owned guys on DraftKings. Henry, I would actually take the under on that quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, I'm still factoring in ownership this week. I don't know. Christy, I don't know if Christy has a different answer than that.
No, I agree with you. Ownership is very important. I think this week with 13 games and because things seem to be a little bit more spread out, it's maybe not quite as important. But I would agree with Tuttle. I mean, it is something you want to factor in because it allows you to get some players that go overlooked that the masses aren't on.
Okay, well, speaking of some players that might go overlooked, let's talk about running back. I know there is some, I guess, is there Rojo chalk now with the news? Is that going to happen?
Not chalk,
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. I think the news happened too late for him to become chalk.
Excellent.
Exactly.
Christy, why don't you start with running back and we'll kind of run it over to Tuttle.
Yeah, absolutely. So for running back, like we mentioned, I think Derrick Henry is going to be the most popular play today. He's projected to carry the most ownership. But, like we talked about, if you want to get Mahomes and some of those other guys in there, it's hard to get all of those players in there. David Montgomery, I think, is a very good cash game and tournament play, too. We've seen what he's done the last couple of weeks, and he gets a great matchup this week. So I think he's a great play. I think Austin Eckler, he was pretty popular last week. His price increased just a little bit, but still think he is a very good play. On the cheap side, we had some things kind of open up too with Gaskin being out for Miami. It opened up DeAndre Washington. So, I think he'll be popular. I know in FanDuel, he's $4,800. Can't remember the price on DraftKings off the top of my head, but I think he's going to be very, very popular in there. On DraftKings, you've got JD McKissick, who is a very cheap player. So I think he's going to carry some ownership over there as well. Aaron Jones, I think, makes a little bit better play over on DraftKings this week because of his price. He's $7,600. He's a little bit higher priced on FanDuel. So I think Henry will probably carry some ownership. But and then, of course, Ronald Jones, with Fournette being out, he's a good price. He doesn't have to worry about Fournette in the backfield with him. I think he makes for a great play. And like Tuttle said, I think it'll be interesting to see on ownership because the news broke so late. It'll be interesting to see where it ends up on that.
All right, Christy, a couple of the guys you mentioned, you said they're going to be popular. And I couldn't tell if that was they're going to be popular and you like them, or they're going to be popular and you're going to take underweight. Like Washington was a guy you mentioned, maybe Derrick Henry as well. Where are you at ownership on those two?
You know what? I actually like both of them. So I like Derrick Henry a lot. I actually wrote him up in my GPP article this week. So I'm definitely overweight on Henry this week. That might be a little bit a different take than most people have. His price has come down a little bit. Last week he didn't perform well, but the game script they got way far behind, and so they didn't need the running game. His upside is immense for running back, so I like that. And Washington, I don't necessarily like him as a player, but he sure makes a lot of things work. And there's a lot of high upside guys that I like in my lineups this week. And so in order to get Mahomes and Adams and Henry in there, I find myself using a lot of Washington this week. And I think he does make a good play.
Excellent. I'll let you and Cardi fight after the show about the Derrick Henry take there.
Okay.
Tuttle, where are you at on running backs? What do you love? And then give me something a little sneakier for tournaments.
Yeah, I really do like the Ronald Jones play now. We saw him losing pretty much all third down work to Fournette, frustratingly, as well as some goal line work. I take this as more like, he's going to get all the work he can handle. It's certainly possible Keyshawn Vaughn will come in and handle some of that third down work. But I think in general, Ronald Jones is a really good play. And like we already said, I think the ownership thing, he'll get some ownership now, but I don't think it will be very heavy at all. I would still take over or under double-digit ownership on Ronald Jones. Somebody else that I think is just purely kind of a great strategic play or a game theory play, you could say. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, I think, probably the lowest price you're going to see him the rest of the season. He's at 5,900 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel. He's a very strong leverage play off that Kansas City passing attack against Miami. Miami has been significantly worse against the run all season long. After the post bye with Kansas City, before Helaire went and missed a couple of games, work was actually trending back towards in his direction. It was kind of frustratingly more like a 50-50 split once they acquired Le'Veon Bell, but it went more towards about a 60-40, 70-30 split. And if he gets a 70-30 split, which gives him about 15 to 20 touches this week, I think it's a really good spot for him. And like I said, I think he's excellent leverage off the passing attack. And we currently have Clyde projected for like 2% ownership, wow, which I think is crazy low, but I also think it's pretty accurate. So I think he's one of my favorite game theory plays of the week. Zeke's another, I think, decent tournament target. We have him projected at 5% ownership on DraftKings, 5% ownership FanDuel. He's going to get 20 touches. Like, he hasn't scored a touchdown without Dak in the lineup, a rushing touchdown, that is. He has one receiving touchdown, but he's going to get 20 plus touches in a good matchup. So I think he makes a lot of sense for tournaments, especially if he's only going to be about 5% owned. And I'm trying to think, there was somebody else I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to give my 2 cents on DeAndre Washington. I think we currently have him projected at 21% ownership on DraftKings and right around the same on FanDuel. I fade all day at that price, at that ownership. I think there's a lot of unknowns with Miami. I don't think we can just go and pencil DeAndre Washington into double-digit touches. I think that's probably a fairly likely scenario. But if Miami struggles to move the ball, which they have a lot with Tua under center and not Fitzpatrick, if they struggle to run the ball, he's not going to get very many high-value opportunities. And if it turns into a game that they're playing from behind, I think he could lose out a lot of snaps to Patrick Laird. So this could kind of be like a Devontae Booker situation we saw last week, I think, with DeAndre Washington. So he's somebody that I'm a little bit shorter on, I think, than the field this week.
Okay, sharp stuff, guys. Before we get to wide receiver, got this question in at running back here from Donnie. He says, Gio versus McKissick in a DKGPP if I'm running a Dallas stack. Do I need that run back, Tuttle?
Say that one more time.
It was Gio versus McKissick in a DKGPP if I'm running a Dallas stack. Do I need the run back?
You don't need the run back, but if you have it at a coin flip, which it kind of sounds like you do, I would always just side with the side that correlates better.
Okay, excellent.
Which would be Gio.
Right. Okay, let's talk about wide receiver. Tuttle, you get to start with cash, and then Christy will get your tournament takes.
Yeah, so everybody's already heard Devontae Adams, best play on the slates.
He's the best play on every slate every time. He's so good.
He's very good. I'm a little bit afraid that we've all mushed him into just like a 0 today or an absolute dud game, but I'm not exactly sure that can happen outside of injury. They're forcing him the ball in the end zone. Devontae Adams, do what you can to get him in if you can. On cash games on DraftKings, it's kind of an interesting lineup construction. I think you can go with like the double value if you really want on cash games, which would be you're looking at guys like Rashad Perriman, Braxton Berrios, who sounds a little bit more doubtful. We won't know. The thing is, we won't know with the Jets receivers until the afternoon slate. With the Jamison Crowder news, I don't think we've got it as of recently, and we probably won't. But I also heard scenarios that Jamison Crowder might be active and be more of an emergency. If that's the case, I still like grabbing exposure to Berrios if Jamison Crowder is active, because I think that will drive Berrios' ownership down significantly. So I like him if I like Berrios in cash games if Crowder's inactive, and I like him a lot better even in tournaments if Crowder is active. I think that makes sense. Another cheap option is Michael Gallup on DraftKings. He's only 3,800. I think he's playable in cash games as well. And then if you move over to FanDuel, Robbie Anderson, I think, is simply too cheap for what he is. 6,500. DJ Moore is out. So I like Robbie Anderson quite a bit. We have him projected as the second highest owned receiver over there. And then teammate Curtis Samuel is a pretty strong secondary option too as well.
Okay, great. Christy, Tuttle only mentioned one receiver who I even know with Adams, and then a bunch of scrubs value guys. So I imagine there's got to be some other guys in the high end that you're interested in tournaments, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the guys, and I know he's going to carry some ownership. I think we have him at 18% or so, but Tyreek Hill, especially in the Mahomes lineups, I like pivoting to him to get away from Devontae Adams. I mean, his upside is immense. I mean, he missed 2 touchdowns last week, and I mean, he's spectacular. So I really like that one a lot. Another guy I really like for tournaments, and I wrote him up this week, and I think he's going to be pretty low owned, is Justin Jefferson. You know, he's in the same matchup that Tyreek was in. I really like that Tampa Bay Minnesota game. I think it's going to be a little bit of a shootout. Tampa Bay's run D is very good, which I think is going to force them to pass. And so I think Thielen and Jefferson are going to get involved often. So I like both of those plays, but especially Jefferson. Also, I think Curtis Samuel too. I mean, I think he's going to be a little bit popular, but, you know, with DJ Moore being out, I think he makes a lot of sense. Kute, I like him a lot. He's way too cheap, especially on FanDuel. He's 5,600. I think he's 5K on DK. He has a lot of upside still at that price. So I think he's a fantastic play. And then Marvin Jones, I think, you know, he's way too cheap too. And I like him as a bring back in some of the Adams stacks for that Green Bay Detroit game. Like him a lot as well. And then, you know, DK Metcalf, another high upside receiver that I think will go a little bit overlooked this week just because of all the other high guys that are going to be a little bit more popular. So those are a few of the guys that I like for tournaments.
Excellent stuff. I'm going to put you on the spot. You mentioned both Samuel and Kuti in FanDuel Cash. D Gold wants to know which one you'd rather have there.
You know, Kute, I think that's who I have in mind right now. That's how I was able to construct it. They're both great plays. They really are. And I like Samuel just because he does have some rushing upside too. It's close.
Okay, great. Why don't you talk tight ends, and you can start with Cash, Christy.
Yeah. So for Cash, I think, you know, you want to try to get up to Kelsey. You know, I mean, he is, you know, he's like a receiver. You know, he's in the top 3 for receivers this year. It's Devontae Adams, Kelsey, and Tyreek. You know, I mean,
really?
Yeah, it is.
I
kind of looked up some of those stats, and so I mean, his upside is great. His price is good. So I think you're going to want to get him up there because no one can really get close to that points. We did see Waller get that last week, of course. So I think Waller's obviously a good play too. But if you're paying up, I think Kelsey's your guy. If you're looking to save some money, I know, if I'm going to save some money, I'm going to go all the way down to a guy like Komet on FanDuel or Logan Thomas. You know, I think he's 3,300 on DK. So I think he makes some sense over there. And then, you know, TJ Hawkinson, I think is a fine play. He doesn't have the upside as Kelsey, but, you know, he's been getting looks, and especially, they've been a little bit shorthanded with Galladay out. I think he's fine. And then I think, you know, Evan Ingram and Tanyan in the Green Bay game are a couple options too, but I'm working really hard to get Kelsey into the cash game lineups this week.
Okay, Tuttle, where are you looking at tight end in both cash and tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Kelsey's kind of the top play easily on both sides. I think on FanDuel, you can kind of make the decision if you want to play and jam in Devontae and Derrick Henry over Kelsey. And that's in that kind of construction, you can't really play all 3. And I do slightly lean that, which sounds crazy. Usually Kelsey would just be a lock 'em in.
So then where do you go?
Yeah, so you got to go cheaper. Either Hawkinson is somebody that Chris, you mentioned. I think he's a pretty strong play. He's a consistent, more of a floor play. But if he does find the end zone, obviously you could pay off his price tag. I think in tournaments, I like Noah Fant quite a bit. We haven't really seen it, but he has upside. Again, we haven't really seen it yet this season, other than the first 2 weeks where he played well, but he theoretically, he's athletic. He'll get targets. He has some of the upside that some of these other guys in the same range don't have. So I do like Noah Fant quite a bit in tournaments. And then another guy that I'm playing a decent amount in tournaments as part of my Russell Wilson stacks is Jacob Hollister, who's really cheap. He's not going to get much ownership at all. He ran a decent number of routes last week. Again, this is a guy that's not going to be a high upside option. But like if you're double stacking with Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and Hollister, basically you're hoping, Wilson's touchdowns go to Metcalf and Hollister. And if Hollister catches one of those touchdowns, he's, a good play at that price point. So I would really only play Hollister in stacks with Russ, but I do like him.
Okay, great. Good stuff. All right, let's talk defense. I'm terrible at picking a defense every week. I hate it. And some weeks there's a defense you're supposed to play. Tuttle, is there one this week where you're like, yeah, this is the one, got to do it?
I think far and away the highest owned in cash game defense on DraftKings will be the Cowboys defense, just because they're really cheap. I don't really love them. I know like Brandon Allen's not great, but I don't think Dallas defense is very good at all.
Right.
So like I understand why they're going to be high owned just because they're really cheap. But I also think if you think they're going to be high owned, it's probably smart to not necessarily play them, especially in tournaments. So pivots off them in tournaments. If you can go up and get up to like the 49ers at 2,700, I think that's fine. And I actually also like the Eagles defense, which sounds like kind of maybe a little bit of a crazy take, but they're only 2,200. Taysom Hill, I'm not ready to take the L on him being a competent passer yet. I'm not. He's played the Falcons twice and the Broncos once. And against the Broncos, he completed like 50% of his pass. Like, I'm not ready to take the L on Taysom Hill being a competent passer yet. So if the Eagles can scheme up some things and get Hill playing from behind, which seems like a big if, being 8-point underdogs, but I still like the Eagles defense, which is probably too hot of a take, but I think it's fine.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that. Before the show, Christy and I were talking. I was like, is he actually a good quarterback? I can't tell. His stats look kind of good, but he can't be.
It's
right?
the Falcons twice. He's not. I'm still not sold. He's not a good passer.
Yeah.
Like, he can do things with his legs, obviously, which keeps him in play for fantasy purposes. But yeah.
All right. Anyways, no time to go down that rant, even though I want to. Christy, anything there at defense that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think like Tuttle said, I think Cowboys are going to be very popular this week. They're 3,500 to on FanDuel, so I think a lot of people will gravitate towards that in cash games. Another play I like is Carolina defense. They're expensive on DraftKings, so this would be just a FanDuel only play. They're $3,400. They've had a couple of good weeks. I kind of like them as a pivot away from the Cowboys. Saints, if you're paying up, but they're very, very expensive. Same with the Seahawks. And then also have some interest in the Bucks D. They were really good to start the season, and I could see them being a decent play this week as well. So otherwise, I agree with the ones that Tuttle had. But if you're, I'm looking probably more to pay down this week, and like you said, Kevin, it's always kind of tough to pick those defenses, and so a lot of times I look to save.
Okay, great. We've got 3 minutes left. I still want to take some questions, but my favorite question that I always get to, probably too late in the show, what is your favorite correlation and or stack? Christy, I'll start with you.
Yep. So my favorite stack, and I mean, it's going to be fairly popular, but the Chiefs, because I like going the Tyreek route and, versus Devontae Adams this week. So they're my favorite. And then close behind, I do like the Tampa Bay, Minnesota game quite a bit. I think it's going to be a shootout.
Okay, great. Tuttle?
Yeah, it's easily for me is the Seattle Jets game. I like the Wilson side, but then I also like, obviously, the Jets players that are really cheap, especially if Crowder's out. I think Perriman and Berrios are really good plays at their price points.
So you plug them in as a run back, and they're cheap, and it opens up value so you can go spend them somewhere else random.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I like it. That gives us roughly 2 minutes to get in some questions. So let's start with ECS. He says, DK Cash, is Duke Johnson okay with McKissick and Henry?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
We didn't talk much about Duke, but yes.
Yeah,
okay.
He does. Yeah, I was gonna say he does make a good cash play.
Jay says, hey, if I'm paying down at tight end in DK Cash, would you recommend a wide receiver in the mid tier, Christy? Who would you recommend at wide receiver in the mid tier? Excuse me.
Who would I recommend in the mid tier?
Yep. If I'm paying down at tight end.
If I'm paying down at tight end, maybe Kute. I'm trying to remember the prices on that. I mean, I think he's like $5,000 or so. Samuel. Yeah, those would be a couple of the guys I would look at.
All right. Mark Flores says, DKGPP Tuttle, who's your favorite 37 and under wide receiver? I have Gallup and Hansen already. So is he going 3 cheap receivers?
Yes, 3,700 has to be Berrios, even with the unknown with Crowder.
Okay, great. I got this question from Fit Crooks. DK Cash, Chris, do you want Aaron Jones and Berrios or Taysom Hill and Perryman?
The first one.
Okay, great. Let's see. Pick and ain't easy says Irv or Akins Cash.
Akins.
All right. Mike Zimmerman says, DK Cash, is Jalen Hurts viable as a cash option?
Probably not for cash, but I mean, I think he's an okay tournament play.
All right. Excellent. That's honestly pretty good. Hey, guys, if, by the way, you are hanging out in the YouTube and you're enjoying this free programming, don't forget, we do this all the time. Multiple Sports, sign up for Rotogrinders Premium, and then you get this all the time. This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just what you see in the ship. But underneath, there's this massive, massive structure of ice that is the core content at Rotogrinders. Was that a decent analogy, you think?
That was great.
That was awesome.
Preston says, DK Cash, Kuti, Samuel, or C. Davis? I feel like a lot of people are hearing this Kuti v. Samuel thing. Kuti.
QT Samuel, or I'll take Samuel.
Okay, great. If Crowder plays, do we swap off Perryman for Berrios? If Crowder plays.
You'd say if Crowder plays, switch off to Perryman?
Do we switch off Perryman for Berrios?
Yeah, I would say that. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That, my friends, is the final question of the day. Unless you have a random strategy question, in which case, feel free to pop it in right now. We might take it, or we might decide to go watch football. I don't know. But I already kind of gave the pitch here. Join up for Core 4 because you not only get this NFL, you also get NBA, and God, I love NBA. Tuttle, you're gonna be joining us, right?
I saw that on the schedule. Well, Meansy made sure to point it out to me. I had no idea.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's gonna. I'm excited for it, man. I think that's gonna be a good fit. Have you done a show with Meansy before?
I don't think so. We talk a lot offline too, and we always meet up at the RG parties and kind of hang out. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, I could see that being a good pairing. Like I could see you and Meansy getting along really well. So yeah, we're pumped to have you on some NBA crunch times. We may occasionally get drunk on the show. Just throwing that out there. I know you're not opposed to that.
Occasionally.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if there were any more questions. Here we go. Donnie has a good afterlock question, and then we'll head on out of here. I know it's lock, but was it a mistake to go double tight end and single entry with Kelsey and Kmet? My thinking is that Kelsey is basically a 7K wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine if you treat Kelsey as a receiver. I wouldn't do it with anybody other than Kelsey, basically.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. And then one more little strategy question here. With all the late games, if you're behind and you need to catch up going into the late games, what's the game to target there? Is there like a trash game that no one's playing that you got to go stack up? Christy?
Oh, let's see. I'm trying to think. I mean, obviously the popular one is going to be, the Green Bay game. You mean as a pivot from Green Bay?
Right. Because if you're behind, you got to do something crazy to, hope that something crappy blows up. So what's your favorite game if you're behind in the 1 o'clock games?
I would say, let me see here. Whoops, gotta remember to. So we've got the Chargers game. I would say I would probably look for some pieces in the Atlanta Chargers game.
Okay, excellent
As a
stuff.
pivot.
Great. Flores Mark says, thank you, Roth, Tuttle, and Christy. Good luck, everyone. Awesome job as always, Devin. That's true. Shout out, Devin, always working hard. With that, we can choose, guys. What do you think? Should we hang out or should we go watch some football? Christy, your choice.
I think we need to watch some football.
I think that's what we do here. Everybody,
Seems like a good choice.
Yeah, for Tuttle, for Christy, for Devin, always working hard behind the scenes. We appreciate you. We love you. And we will catch you next week. You have been crunched.